She thought the forest was her sanctuary, until the golden eyes in the shadows decided she wasn't walking alone anymore. Aralyn Vera had never been one to obey the rules. Born on the edge of the northern forest, she grew up running barefoot along the riverbanks, climbing trees taller than any villager dared, and leaping across rocks in the rushing streams with a grace that left her friends in awe and her teachers exasperated. Her long red hair flowed like molten fire down her back, catching the sunlight or moonlight in dazzling waves, and she carried herself with a reckless pride that warned everyone around. Do not try to tame her. Tonight, the forest was bathed in silver, the moon heavy and low. Aralyn moved silently among the whispering trees, boots muffled on the soft moss, every movement purposeful yet untamed. She didn't flinch at the rustle of leaves or the faint crack of a branch. She expected danger and met it with curiosity rather than fear. Unseen, someone followed her. Golden eyes glinted in the shadows. Arender Kale, known among his pack as the Alpha of the Northern Territory, remained hidden, silent, observing. He wasn't muscular in the traditional sense, but his presence radiated power and danger. Every step he took, invisible yet precise, carried authority. The villagers whispered of him in hushed tones, "He moves like a ghost. He rules like a storm." And tonight, that storm was focused entirely on her. Kale had been watching Aralyn for days. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply followed, noting her patterns, her fearless movements, her daring leaps across fallen logs, her refusal to flinch at the forest's natural dangers. Every instinct in him told him to mark her territory, to assert dominance, to scare her into submission, and every instinct screamed curiosity and obsession. Aralyn paused near a clearing, brushing a strand of fiery hair behind her ear. She sensed something, a weight in the air, an unseen gaze, but she didn't stop. She never stopped. She moved forward, unaware that the Alpha's golden eyes tracked her every motion, unseen, silent, calculating. By the time dawn touched the village, Aralyn's presence had already sparked whispers. Villagers knew her as the untamed girl who laughed at danger and lived on her own terms. She's reckless, she's unafraid, she belongs to no one, they said. Kale observed silently from a distance, keeping her in sight as she moved through the village streets, his golden eyes scanning for any threat to her or himself. Every laugh she gave, every sharp glance at someone daring to challenge her, made him tighten his jaw. He didn't like being unsettled, but she disturbed the order he prided himself on. She had no fear of him, and that was both infuriating and captivating. He could feel her defiance in every step, her confidence in every flick of her hair, her fire in every glance. The forest had always obeyed him. Even the pack trembled at his approach. Yet Aralyn, she walked like the forest itself followed her, and he was powerless to stop admiring her audacity. Night returned, and with it, the shadows grew longer. Aralyn returned to the forest, unaware that Kale had already settled in the tree line, watching, studying her like prey he couldn't let escape. He followed her silently, moving like a shadow himself. No one dared enter the forest at night, except the brave or the foolish, and he considered both terms for Aralyn. She was fearless, untamed, reckless, and utterly enthralling. Every time she paused to look at the stars, stretch her legs along a fallen tree, or dive into the cold river, he noted it all. Kale's patience was legendary. His temper feared. He could destroy anyone with a word, a gesture, or a simple look. Yet he didn't move to her. He didn't intervene. He merely watched. There was a thrill in observing someone so fearless, someone who had no idea she had an alpha watching her, and he allowed himself the rare pleasure of admiration mixed with frustration. The forest echoed with quiet tension. Aralyn's hair shimmered red in the moonlight, her movements untamed. Kale's eyes burned gold in the shadows. The air itself seemed to hum with the unspoken duel between predator and untamed fire. Neither moved, neither spoke, yet the moment carried a weight far greater than words could capture. Aralyn didn't know she was being followed. Her red hair caught the moonlight as she leapt across mossy logs, dipped into streams, and climbed rocky hills, with the freedom of someone who believed the forest itself belonged to her. Her laughter echoed in the night, a sound that was both playful and defiant. She was untamed, reckless, alive. Kale's eyes followed her like a predator, unseen but ever present. He didn't move to stop her yet. He let her believe she was alone, letting the thrill of the chase build. Every movement she made, every confident step, made his golden eyes narrow with a mix of irritation and fascination. He had ruled this forest for years. He had enforced fear with just a glance. But she was rewriting every rule. When she paused at a ridge overlooking the river, brushing a strand of hair from her face, Kale's shadow remained hidden in the trees. The wind carried her scent, wild and untamed, and it hit him like a storm. He wanted to step forward, to warn her, to claim his dominance, yet he held back, feeding off the tension. For Kale, this was new territory. Usually, fear ruled interactions with humans and pack members alike. But Aralyn's fearlessness intrigued him, irritated him, enticed him in a way he had never known. He felt the urge to intervene, and yet, the more he restrained himself, the more intoxicating the chase became. By the next morning, Aralyn was already stirring trouble in the village without even realizing it. She refused to follow paths deemed safe or advice given by elders. She moved with her own rhythm, tripped on no path but the one she chose, and laughed at anyone who tried to caution her. Her reputation as untamable and fearless had spread far beyond her village. Travelers and merchants whispered about the red-haired girl who defied the alpha of the northern forest, though they didn't know Kale was watching everything from afar, silently approving and disapproving in equal measure. Kale wasn't here to punish her, not yet. He wanted her to understand the forest, the rules, the dangers, but through her own recklessness. He wanted her to feel the pull of fear before he decided to intervene. And she, of course, didn't know a single thing. She only knew freedom, and that infuriated him. Every laugh, every confident stride, every fiery glare toward anyone who dared question her made him clench his jaw. He wanted to scream at her, to shake her into submission, to claim his dominance, yet he stayed hidden, calculating, obsessing over the girl who did not know him. A week later, Kale decided to test her boundaries subtly. He moved closer than usual while she ran along her usual path, stepping on higher ridges, brushing past thick branches. For the first time, she felt the weight of someone's presence behind her. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with curiosity. She paused and spoke softly, almost taunting. "If you're going to follow me, at least make yourself seen. Or are you a shadow too afraid to face me?" Kale froze. His golden eyes gleamed in the darkness. Her words were fire, her defiance undeniable. Most would have fled trembling or called for help. She smiled. He didn't respond. He remained still, letting her think she had the upper hand. His silence was deliberate, calculated, and Aralyn, fiery as she was, could feel it, the tension, the power, the pull she didn't yet understand. For Kale, this was a first. He couldn't simply command, intimidate, or threaten. She was untamed in every sense, and for the first time, the predator wanted the chase more than the kill. Aralyn had never been ordinary, not just in her spirit, her fire, her fearlessness. There was something hidden, something she herself didn't know. A mark, faint yet undeniable, etched across the center of her back, concealed beneath her long red hair. Kale had known about it for years. His late grandmother, a wise seer within the northern forest pack, had once warned him, "The child who carries the mark will one day awaken power, but only the alpha who claims her can guide it." That mark was the reason he had been following her all this time. Not for sport, not for fear, and certainly not for curiosity alone, though those had added to his fascination. The mark held the key to his greatest power, a force even the elders feared. No one else knew, not her, not the villagers, not even the pack members who whispered rumors about the untamed red-haired girl. Only he and his grandmother had known, and now, only he remained to watch over it. Kale's golden eyes lingered on her from the shadows as she ran along the riverside, the sunlight glinting off her hair like fire. She didn't know he was there. She didn't know she was being tracked, observed, calculated. And she certainly didn't know that a single brush of his touch toward that mark could awaken forces she wasn't ready to control. Days turned into nights, and Kale continued his silent pursuit. He didn't approach her directly, that would be reckless. Instead, he shadowed her movements, studied her choices, her confidence, her boldness. He noted how she paused at the riverbank, how she never flinched at sudden noises, how she stared fearlessly at the sky when the wind roared through the forest. One evening, the sky turned blood orange as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Aralyn stopped at a clearing, breathing heavily, and ran her fingers through her hair. Kale's instinct screamed to step forward, just a small step, to test her, to feel the weight of her presence beneath his own. But he didn't. He remained a shadow, allowing the thrill to build, letting the tension stretch thin like a bowstring ready to snap. And yet, something in him longed to intervene, to feel the spark of danger against her untamed spirit, to see how she would react if she truly knew she was being watched. Kale had learned patience over decades. Most things he desired, he could take. Most prey, he could dominate. But Aralyn, she was different. Her independence, her reckless courage, the way she laughed at danger. She was untouchable by normal alpha dominance. He wanted to test her, but subtly. One night, when she climbed the ridge overlooking the forest's edge, he let a branch fall near her foot, not to harm, only to observe. She froze, then glanced around. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the tree line. Kale held his breath behind a veil of shadow. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She smiled faintly, almost mockingly, and stepped forward as if to say, "I am not afraid. You can try." He clenched his jaw. For the first time in years, Kale felt something dangerous stirring in him, a mixture of desire, frustration, and awe. That mark on her back, hidden beneath her fiery hair, was more than a symbol. It was a promise that the forest, the pack, and even himself would never be the same once it awakened. By now, the villagers whispered not just about Aralyn's reckless nature but also about a mysterious shadow that seemed to follow her. Some swore they had glimpsed a golden glow in the tree line, moving silently behind her, but she didn't notice. She laughed at danger, at whispers, at anything that tried to cage her. Kale's obsession had grown, not with control, not with domination, but with guarding the mark without her knowing. He couldn't allow anyone to see it, touch it, or awaken it prematurely. And yet, he couldn't help but study her, admire her, curse her audacity, and feel a pull towards something he had never experienced before. The night wrapped around them, dense and mysterious. Aralyn ran freely, oblivious. Kale remained a shadow, a silent observer, a guardian and predator all at once. The tension between freedom and control stretched taut. Their first meeting was inevitable, but not tonight. Tonight, he would remain in the shadows, letting the bond unspoken, unseen, electric grow. Kale remained unseen, a shadow in the dense foliage, golden eyes glinting as he followed her. No sound betrayed his presence. No misstep gave him away. He had been trailing her for days, silently, deliberately, because of the mark she carried on her back, a mark no one else knew about, a mark that could awaken a power even he had only glimpsed. Only his late grandmother had told him about it before her death, and now the responsibility rested entirely on his shoulders. That mark had the potential to change the balance of the forest, the pack, and perhaps even the world beyond. But Aralyn didn't know she had it. She didn't know that her very being had drawn Kale here, to watch, to protect, and perhaps to claim when the time was right. The wind carried her scent, wild and unrestrained, and Kale's senses flared. He didn't step closer. He didn't interfere. Every instinct told him to remain hidden, to watch, to let her prove herself, to let her fire, her defiance, her untamed courage reveal who she truly was. The next night, Aralyn ran further than she ever had. The forest opened into a vast clearing, the river reflecting the silver moon like liquid light. Her lungs burned, her muscles flexed, but she thrived on it. She thrived on being untamed, free, unstoppable. Kale remained in the shadows along the ridges, unseen. He had watched enough to understand her rhythms, her patterns, the daring choices she made without fear. Every time she paused near the water, stretching, catching her breath, he calculated how much danger she could face, and how much he could allow without revealing himself. There was an odd thrill in watching her ignorance, in knowing that she carried the key to his own power without realizing it. Every instinct told him to approach, to test her, to mark her, but he restrained himself. He was patient. He knew the value of waiting, of letting the bond grow quietly, secretly, until the moment he decided she was ready, or he could no longer resist. Kale wanted her to sense him without realizing it. One night, a branch snapped near her foot, subtle, almost accidental, but enough to make her glance toward the shadows. Her gaze flickered briefly, suspicion hinting at her untamed curiosity. Yet she continued forward as if nothing had happened. Kale's breath was steady, his presence unseen. He didn't call her out. He didn't intimidate her. He simply moved with her, close enough to influence her surroundings without her ever knowing. The thrill was in the chase, in the silent control, in the hidden knowledge that her mark could unlock something unimaginable in him, something even centuries of experience had not prepared him for. Aralyn's confidence never wavered, her fire never dimmed, and that only made him tighten his jaw in frustration, a rare sensation he hated, but a sensation he couldn't deny was addictive. Aralyn's forest wasn't just a backdrop, it had its own ecosystem of characters, unseen yet influential. There was Morrigan, the village herbalist, an older woman whose hands could heal cuts faster than nature allowed, and whose eyes could see the faintest change in the forest. She had noticed Aralyn wandering farther than any had before, but she said nothing. Her instincts whispered that Aralyn was special, and that the forest itself had chosen to protect her. Then there was Tavik, a young tracker, mischievous and eager, who often tried to follow Aralyn on her wild escapades. She always noticed him eventually, and gave him a glare so sharp it sent him tumbling over roots. He had yet to see Kale, but his whispers of something watches her, I swear, went unheard by the others. Kale's patience extended to observing all these players. He needed to understand the entire ecosystem around Aralyn. He needed to know who could pose a threat to her or the mark she carried, and more importantly, he needed to ensure that no one, not Morrigan, not Tavik, not anyone, could stumble upon the secret that only he and his late grandmother knew. As Aralyn raced along the mossy banks of the river, laughing as Tavik struggled behind her, Kale lingered in the shadows. Each laugh, each reckless move, made him simultaneously frustrated and fascinated. The forest was alive with unseen eyes, with unseen tensions, but none of them knew the hidden power waiting to awaken. Tavik tried to match her pace, stumbling over rocks and roots, calling out for her to slow down. Aralyn merely laughed, the sound echoing off the rocks, defying him, teasing him, and testing the limits of her own freedom. Kale's eyes narrowed. Even Tavik, playful as he was, didn't see the danger surrounding Aralyn. He didn't know that every movement she made carried the potential to awaken powers beyond his control, powers linked to the mark on her back. Aralyn turned suddenly, catching Tavik about to fall into a stream. Careful, or you'll ruin your shoes, she said, her voice light but commanding. Tavik grinned sheepishly, bowing slightly, and she continued on her path, unaware that Kale's gaze followed her every step. Kale's patience, as much as he valued it, was tested by her fearless abandon. Every careless leap, every laugh, every glance toward the horizon pulled him deeper into a silent obsession he couldn't name, and he knew that, eventually, he would have to act, but for now, the forest was theirs. The tension between predator and untamed spirit thickened like the mist curling over the river. Morrigan had lived in the forest her entire life. She could sense the vibrations of power and danger more acutely than anyone. When Aralyn ran past her little hut that morning, hair flaming in the sunlight, Morgan's brow furrowed. There's something about her, she muttered to herself, eyes following the streak of red as Aralyn disappeared into the trees. Something even I cannot touch. Something old. Something dangerous. And she was right. Kale, lurking unseen, had noted Morgan's subtle gaze, but it mattered little. He knew the herbalist's instincts were wise, but nothing would reveal the truth about the mark, not yet. The secret remained his alone. Meanwhile, Aralyn, blissfully ignorant of the invisible forces surrounding her, laughed like fire through the forest, untamed, unafraid, unstoppable. Kale's presence wasn't just observation. It was protection, calculation, and silent obsession. He had learned patience over decades, and he would wait as long as necessary to ensure that Aralyn remained unharmed. She didn't know. She would never know, not yet. And the mark, faint beneath her hair, held a secret that could unlock abilities he had only dreamed of controlling. One day, perhaps soon, the forest, the pack, and the world beyond would all recognize the force she carried within her. For now, Kale followed, hidden, patient, calculating, a shadow among shadows, and Aralyn, untamed as fire, danced through the trees, unaware of the golden eyes that tracked her every move, and the power that quietly pulsed beneath her skin. The moon hung low, a silver coin in the sky, casting pale light across the forest floor. Aralyn paused at a small clearing, brushing leaves from her long red hair. She had been running for hours, though the exhilaration coursing through her veins made every step feel lighter, every movement freer. She had no idea why she felt the occasional chill when running, the feeling that someone unseen was watching. She dismissed it each time, attributing it to superstition, to the whispering wind, to the shadows dancing between the trees. But Kale knew. He always knew. The mark on her back, faint beneath the cascade of hair, was a pulse, a secret heartbeat of power. It had called him here long before he even arrived in this forest. And now, watching her, the pull was almost unbearable. Kale stepped silently between the trees, careful not to reveal himself. He had been trailing her for days, and yet each movement he made was calculated. The forest gave him cover, the darkness his shield. He wanted to test her without her realizing it. A low branch shifted as he passed, and a faint sound rustled through the leaves. Aralyn's head snapped up, eyes narrowing, but she saw only shadows. Her chest rose and fell with excitement. She loved the thrill, the sense that the forest could surprise her, challenge her, dare her to be untamed. Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. If only she knew. If only she knew how much the slightest awareness of her presence could shift the balance of his power, how much danger hovered unseen because of the mark she bore. And yet, he remained patient. He would not reveal himself. Not tonight. Not until she was ready. Until he could be sure she could survive the storm that was coming. Kale's frustration grew, not with Aralyn, but with the pull she exerted without knowing it. She moved like fire through the forest, every step defiant, every gesture untamed, every laugh a challenge. He wanted to intervene, to mark her, to stake a claim over the destiny tied to that hidden mark, but he could not. Patience was his only weapon. He watched as she leapt across a narrow stream, water splashing around her feet. Her hair caught the light, a blazing curtain, and the faint hint of the mark beneath it throbbed like a heartbeat only he could feel. Kale's fists clenched. Every instinct screamed for him to step out of the shadows, to claim what was his, to draw her into the dangerous, seductive orbit of his world. But he waited. He had to wait. The mark demanded control, the bond demanded timing, and Aralyn demanded respect, even if she had no idea he existed. Days blended into nights. Aralyn never once saw Kale, yet with every passing hour, an invisible tension built between them. It was as if the forest itself carried whispers of a connection too deep to name. Kale noticed the tiniest things, how her eyes sparkled when moonlight hit her hair, how she laughed at shadows, how she tested every risk instinctively. The forest, though seemingly tranquil, was alive with its own rhythm. Birds scattered when Aralyn moved past, their wings slicing through moonlight. Small creatures peeked from under logs, watching the fiery-haired girl dash like a streak of blood and fire. Among the hidden eyes, Kale remained the most dangerous, golden irises reflecting a patience that could break mountains. Yet he wasn't the only observer. Raven, a live wolf of the outskirts, prowled silently near the riverbank. Though unseen by Aralyn, he sensed Kale's presence and the latent energy pulsing from the mark on her back. He tilted his head, a low growl vibrating in his throat, curious and cautious. Lyra, a mischievous fly-like sprite, flitted through the treetops, drawn to Aralyn's untamed energy. She couldn't see Kale but sensed the tension, the hidden bond forming between predator and prey, guardian and untamed soul. Lyra giggled softly, trailing ribbons of light behind her as she followed Aralyn, unseen but always present. The forest wasn't quiet, it whispered. It watched. It knew the threads that connected them, even if Aralyn did not. Aralyn occasionally encountered other travelers in the forest, unaware of Kale's gaze following her. Tavik, persistent but naive, had learned to keep a respectful distance, hiding behind large oaks, always trying to catch glimpses of Aralyn's daring leaps over the river. Morrigan, the wise herbalist, observed from her cottage windows. She had taught Aralyn a few minor forest remedies, unknowingly prepping her for survival against hidden dangers. Morrigan's heart whispered warnings she didn't understand yet. Fenric, a quiet hunter from a distant village, sometimes appeared on Aralyn's path. He admired her untamed spirit but didn't realize she was marked. Didn't realize she carried a power beyond comprehension. Kale watched them all. Every interaction was a variable in his calculation, a test of Aralyn's untamed resilience. He wanted to see how she moved in relation to others, how she handled interference, how she survived the subtle dangers of life beyond her knowledge. Aralyn, for her part, laughed at Tavik's missteps, waved to Fenric politely but briefly, and remained entirely untamed. She was wild, brave, and unaware of the golden eyes in the shadows tracking her every heartbeat. Kale's focus remained unbroken. Every day he traced Aralyn's movements in his mind, every gesture recorded, every misstep analyzed. The mark on her back pulsed faintly beneath the surface of her skin. Only he could see its energy, a flicker in the moonlight, a hum in the air. He remembered the stories his grandmother had whispered, tales of the rare ones born with marks capable of unlocking latent alpha powers, marks that could bend time, influence minds, even awaken forces thought lost. He did not dare act, not yet. Aralyn, laughing freely as she balanced along a fallen tree, oblivious to the power hidden within her, was the epicenter of everything he had trained for. The pull was almost magnetic. The mark called to him in ways no other being could. He had to stay patient. He had to wait. And yet, the frustration of waiting twisted within him, a fire he could not extinguish. For the first time, Kale allowed a subtle test. A branch snapped unnaturally underfoot. Aralyn froze, senses heightened, but she didn't see him. The branch was moved on purpose, a simple test of her reflexes, her instinct, her untamed resilience. She scanned the shadows, frowning slightly, but attributed it to the forest itself, to wind, to small animals. Anything but the truth. Kale had been near enough to touch, near enough to change her path if he wanted. Kale's frustration grew, tempered only by the knowledge that her reaction proved her worth. She was untamed, unpredictable, and yet strong enough to survive, at least for now. And that was exactly what he needed. Patience, preparation, and power all intertwined in the golden pull of the mark. The dawn came slowly, spilling gold across the forest floor. Mist clung to the trees like a cloak, and the air smelled of moss and rain from the night before. Aralyn ran barefoot along the creek, hair trailing behind her like fire in motion. She was untamed, unpredictable, living for the thrill of the wild. But she wasn't alone. Tavik, ever eager, stumbled behind her, panting, determined to keep up despite the treacherous roots and slick moss. "Aralyn, wait!" he shouted, nearly falling into the creek. She paused, smirking. "Catch me if you can," she teased, the wind carrying her laughter through the forest. Nearby, Fenric, the quiet hunter, was observing. He had been following them at a distance, intrigued not only by Aralyn's fearless movements but also by Tavik's insistence on keeping pace. He didn't intervene. Fenric preferred to watch and measure, a silent guardian in his own right. And above, Lyra, the tiny fly-like sprite, darted through the shafts of sunlight, giggling as she played with small motes of mist, teasing Tavik whenever he got too close. "You'll never catch her," she chirped, circling him in a playful spiral. Kale, hidden in the shadows, observed every interaction, every laugh, every stumble. Every spark of life around Aralyn was data, patterns, proof of resilience. He noted Tavik's loyalty, Fenric's caution, and Lyra's mischief. Each could become an ally or a hindrance. But for now, they were pieces in a puzzle only he could see. As Aralyn disappeared into the trees, Tavik and Fenric paused. "She's impossible," Tavik huffed, wiping sweat from his brow. "She never waits, never listens, and she's like fire." Fenric's dark eyes followed the retreating figure. "Fire is dangerous," he said calmly, "but so is the forest. She moves as if she knows its secrets. I've seen her react to things no one else notices, signs, sounds, shadows. She's sharper than she appears." Tavik frowned. "You're serious?" "She's just reckless." Fenric shook his head. "Reckless is one word. Untamed is another. And trust me, Tavik, there are things in this forest, things you don't understand yet, that she will face alone. You're lucky to be alive when you follow her." Tavik swallowed nervously. "You think she knows she's being followed?" Fenric's eyes darkened. "No, she has no idea. And some things are better left unknown." Lyra, the spirit, zipped through the forest with playful energy, leaving trails of faint light. She darted in front of Aralyn, who stumbled slightly but laughed, catching herself. "Who's there? Show yourself." Lyra giggled. "It's me. Don't be scared, Firehair." Aralyn squinted into the trees. You're real?" Lyra twirled around, sprinkling sparkling dust. "As real as the sun, as invisible as the wind." "I like you, Firehair. You're wild and untamed, perfect for the forest." Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't like distractions. Yet, even Lyra's mischief highlighted the way Aralyn moved through the forest, unaware of the golden eyes tracking her every heartbeat. Nightfall returned, and Kale lingered on a ridge overlooking the clearing where Aralyn now rested. Catching her breath, his golden eyes scanned every movement, every twitch of her fingers, every twitch of hair against her back. The mark pulsed faintly beneath the red cascade, calling to him. He clenched his fists, anger and anticipation warring within. He wanted to reach her, to claim what was his by destiny, to test the untamed spirit beneath the fiery hair. But he stayed. Patience was his weapon. Below, Aralyn stretched lazily, unaware of him, unaware of the hidden threads, pulling her toward a destiny she didn't know existed. And Kale's shadowed presence would remain until the forest itself whispered that the time had come to act. Dusk fell slowly, painting the forest in shades of violet and gold. Aralyn had settled near a small waterfall, the mist cooling her skin, her fiery hair wet and tangled. Tavik sat nearby, trying to catch his breath. You never stop, do you?" he panted. Aralyn laughed, tossing a stray lock of hair over her shoulder. "Stop? Why would I ever stop? The forest is alive. I'm alive. That's reason enough." Fenric appeared from behind the rocks, silently joining them. "Alive, yes, but oblivious," he murmured, eyes scanning the trees. "There's more here than just light and water. Shadows move differently around you." Aralyn frowned. "What do you mean?" Fenric shook his head. "Nothing, or maybe everything. Just stay alert, fire hair." Lyra darted around them, leaving trails of light in her wake. "Alert, yes. Danger or fun? Maybe both." She giggled, diving through the mist with effortless speed. Tavik groaned. "Fun is not what I'm feeling." Kale, perched on a moss-covered branch above, observed them all in silence. He watched the interplay, noting how each interaction tested Aralyn's instincts, but his gaze returned, always, to the faint pulse of her mark, hidden beneath her soaked red hair. Kale finally allowed himself a subtle test. A branch snapped under his weight as he shifted closer to the clearing. Aralyn froze, instinct sharpening her senses, but she saw nothing unusual. Tavik looked around nervously. "Did you hear that?" "I did," Aralyn said, calm, her fiery eyes scanning the forest. "Probably a deer or something." Fenric's jaw tightened, sensing an unseen presence. "No deer moves like that," he muttered. Kale stayed hidden, letting them stew in suspense. Every heartbeat of Aralyn, every shallow breath, called to him like a drumbeat. He didn't step out yet. He didn't speak. The forest, alive and aware, held its breath along with him. Lyra, sensing the tension, zipped closer to Aralyn. "Something's watching you," she squeaked. Aralyn laughed softly. "I'll handle it, little spark." Kale's lips curved slightly, invisible, almost proud. She was untamed, fearless, just as he had imagined. The group moved together slowly toward the forest edge, Aralyn leading confidently. She spotted a fallen log blocking the path and, without hesitation, leapt over it with ease. Tavik stumbled and swore under his breath. Fenric raised an eyebrow. "How does she do that every time?" Lyra giggled. "She's fire, not just hair. Look at her go." Kale's eyes narrowed. The mark beneath her skin pulsed faintly, responding to her adrenaline, her spirit, her untamed energy. He could feel it even from his hidden perch. And he knew, without a doubt, that no one else could harness it, not yet, not ever. He let her move past, letting her prove her strength, yet simultaneously ensuring the unseen threads of their destinies intertwined more tightly with each passing second. As night fell, the group decided to make a small camp. Aralyn gathered dry branches with precision, Tavik fumbling awkwardly, and Fenric silently prepared a small fire. Lyra hovered above, sending tiny sparks into the flames, giggling at her own magic. Kale, still unseen, sat atop a ridge overlooking them, watching. The fire illuminated Aralyn's hair, the red shining like molten gold in the dim light. He could see the faint curve of her mark through the thin fabric of her tunic. The mark called to him in whispers only he could hear. He allowed himself a rare thought. She doesn't even know yet. The chaos, the power, the destiny awaiting her. And when she finds out, will she run, or will she rise? Lyra darted close to the ridge. "Shh, someone's watching again," she whispered to Aralyn. Aralyn frowned. "I'll handle it, little spark, always." Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. Patience, only patience. Tavik followed behind, still struggling to match her agility. "Seriously, how do you do this every time?" he huffed, trying not to slip. Aralyn laughed softly, the sound like wind through the pines. "I move like the forest teaches me, Tavik, every leaf, every branch. They whisper if you listen." Fenric watched silently, his dark eyes scanning the forest. "She's alive in ways most people aren't," he murmured. Lyra zipped above them, leaving a trail of glittering light. "Alive, wild, fire hair, perfect," she whispered, landing lightly on Aralyn's shoulder. From the shadows, Kale observed, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the mist. Every movement, every interaction with Tavik and Fenric, every giggle from Lyra all noted. But today, Cale allowed himself to play a subtle game. He wanted Aralyn to notice a presence without knowing who it truly was. Aralyn paused by the river, crouching to drink water. Tavik and Fenric caught up, catching their breath. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog. He was ordinary looking, dressed in simple forest clothes, hood over his head, leaning slightly on a walking stick. His presence was calm, unassuming, and intentional. Excuse me, he said, voice smooth, casual, friendly. I seem to be lost. Could you maybe help me? Aralyn looked up, wary. Her eyes narrowed. Lost? Yes, he replied, lifting his hood slightly, revealing sharp but nondescript features. I've been wandering for hours. I couldn't help but notice. Your movements, you're extraordinary. Tavik whispered, who is this guy? Fenric's dark eyes narrowed. Keep your distance. Lyra hovered closer, sparks trailing her wings. He's interesting, too calm. Something's off. Aralyn's pulse quickened, but curiosity won over caution. Extraordinary? She repeated, brushing damp hair from her face. What do you mean? I admire how you move, how you survive here. It's rare, the man said softly, almost reverently. I had to see it for myself. Truly remarkable. Aralyn blinked, unsure how to respond. Her instincts screamed to flee, but something about his calm confidence. The man stepped closer but not too close, keeping distance polite. He smiled faintly. I just wanted to say, your spirit is unmatched. I've never seen anyone move like that. Aralyn crossed her arms, skeptical. And who are you? I'm a traveler, he replied, voice gentle, unthreatening. I've wandered far, but seeing someone like you, I wanted to meet you. Tavik muttered, I don't trust him. Fenric nodded slightly. Neither do I. Lyra zipped in circles, her tiny voice squeaking. Something's wrong, but he's not like the others. I can feel it. Aralyn frowned. Her instincts told her to be wary, and yet, the stranger's calm, reverent admiration was oddly compelling. Cale in disguise was perfect. She didn't yet know him. She didn't know the golden eyes behind the ordinary face, the alpha who had tracked her every heartbeat, or the mark that called him like a magnet. The disguised Cale continued walking beside her, speaking with calculated pauses, letting her notice his calmness, the almost imperceptible strength behind his posture. I can't explain why, but seeing you today, I feel like I've witnessed something extraordinary, something that shouldn't be possible, he said softly. Aralyn glanced at him. You've seen a lot of things. Don't flatter me. I know what I can do. He smiled faintly, almost shyly. No, I mean it. You're unlike anyone I've ever met. Lyra fluttered closer to Aralyn's shoulder, her tiny glowing eyes studying the man suspiciously. Tavik shuffled nervously. Fenric's hand brushed against his knife, caution instinctively rising. Cale let them observe, letting their suspicions and curiosity grow simultaneously. He did not reveal himself, not yet, but the seeds were planted. Trust, intrigue, fascination, and the faintest hint of admiration. The sun spilled across the cobblestone paths of the forest-adjacent village. Aralyn moved confidently, basket swinging lightly from her arm, hair glinting like flames in the morning light. Tavik ran to catch up. You don't have to do everything yourself, Aralyn. I like it this way, she replied, ducking a stray chicken. Cale, still in his ordinary human disguise, trailed behind, pretending to fumble with his map. He tripped over a stone, rolled, and sat up, brushing imaginary dust from his pants. Are you okay? Aralyn asked briefly without looking at him. I'm fine, just lost, Cale said, blinking innocently, holding the map upside down. He knocked over a basket of apples and cursed softly, then muttered, oh no, not again. People stared, Tavik groaned, and Fenric's dark eyes burned daggers at the oblivious alpha. Lyra zipped above the scene, sparkling, clearly enjoying the chaos. Aralyn shook her head, ignoring him completely. Some people just shouldn't carry maps. Cale grinned faintly, unbothered by her tone. He would follow her anywhere, act ridiculous, get ignored but never give up. Later, Aralyn moved along a forest path toward her favorite clearing. She hummed softly, unaware of the shadow in the distance. Kale, pretending to stumble again, accidentally rolled into a bush right in her path. Leaves flew everywhere. Aralyn stopped, brushing herself off. "Really?" she muttered, tossing a glance over her shoulder. Kale looked up, smiling sheepishly. I saw you from afar. I was trying to catch up." "Really, I swear." Lyra zipped past, giggling uncontrollably. "He's ridiculous," Tavik groaned. "I can't believe he's still here." Fenric just shook his head, muttering something about him. "It's not normal." "Keep your eyes open, Aralyn." Kale's golden eyes burned faintly beneath his hood. Aralyn didn't know it, but every silly move he made was calculated. A subtle test to measure her reflexes, reactions, and patience. By noon, Aralyn reached the riverbank, ready to cross. Stone slick with moss made the crossing tricky. She hopped from stone to stone with perfect balance. Kale, still pretending to be lost, attempted the same crossing behind her. He slipped, nearly falling into the water, and grabbed a branch for balance. "You're doing it wrong," Aralyn said sharply, not even turning her head. "Try stepping like this." She demonstrated fluidly across the stones. Kale tilted his head, pretending to mimic her but accidentally dropped his staff into the water, splashing himself. "Oh no, my staff," he exclaimed dramatically. Tavik laughed, Fenric pinched the bridge of his nose, and Lyra zipped above, clapping her tiny hands. "He's hopeless." Aralyn didn't look back. "Some people just don't belong in the forest." Kale smiled faintly, silently noting her careful movements, her instincts, her strength, all while acting foolish. As evening fell, the group decided to set up a small camp near a cliffside with a view of the valley. Aralyn moved swiftly, gathering firewood. Kale accidentally set his bag on a patch of wet moss and fell with a loud thud, startling Tavik. "Are you all right?" Aralyn asked briefly without looking. "I'm fine, just... I don't know why this keeps happening," Kale said, rubbing his shoulder with mock frustration. Fenric sighed, muttering, "Everywhere she goes, he follows." Acting like a fool, Lyra zipped circles around Kale, leaving trails of sparkling light, laughing at his antics. "He's trying, but he's silly." Kale's golden eyes flickered, watching Aralyn from the firelight. She still didn't know his true identity, but his plan was working. He remained close, observing, protecting, and studying her movements, all under the guise of incompetence. The next day, the group ventured deeper into the forest. They reached a rickety wooden bridge over a rushing stream, its rotting boards creaking under weight. "Careful," Fenric warned. "This bridge won't hold a lot of weight." Aralyn stepped first, testing each plank with ease. Tavik followed nervously, glancing down at the churning water below. Kale stepped up behind them, pretending to hesitate. Maybe this isn't safe," he mumbled, exaggerating fear. The plank beneath Tavik cracked with a sharp snap. Tavik froze in terror, eyes wide. I'm stuck." Aralyn's reflexes were lightning fast, but Kale's golden eyes flickered with amusement. Without a word, he shifted his stance subtly, and the plank stabilized under Tavik's weight. Tavik managed to move forward, oblivious to Kale's interference. "Phew, that was lucky," Tavik exclaimed. Kale scratched his head, pretending to be confused. I have no idea what just happened." Fenric's eyes narrowed. "Lucky, huh?" Aralyn didn't notice, focused on the next steps. Kale smiled faintly, the mark beneath her hair pulsing in resonance. Sensing her untamed energy, he remained hidden, unacknowledged, yet always protecting and guiding her movements. Later, Aralyn attempted to climb a tree to retrieve a rare herb hanging from a high branch. Tavik muttered, "You really trust your arms more than me." Kale, still disguised, casually approached the base of the tree. As Aralyn grabbed the branch, the rope tied around her waist slipped. She almost toppled, but Kale instinctively nudged the rope just enough, and it caught securely again. Aralyn froze, unsure what had happened. That was weird, she muttered, shaking her head. Lyra zipped around laughing. He's doing it again. That's magic, right? Fenric glared. I don't like it, that man. Something's off. Tavik whispered. Yeah, he's helping but acting like a fool. Aralyn, still untamed and focused on the herb, didn't connect the dots, unaware of the invisible strings Kale pulled to ensure her safety while pretending ignorance. Later that afternoon, the group came across another obstacle, a rolling log across a swift stream. Tavik hesitated. There's no way I can cross this. Aralyn didn't hesitate. She bounded across gracefully. Tavik watched, wide-eyed, then tried to mimic her. The log wobbled dangerously. Kale stepped forward, pretending to lose his balance and almost fall, but subtle movements of his hands stabilized the log, allowing Tavik to cross safely. I made it, Tavik shouted, unaware of Kale's silent assistance. Kale laughed softly to himself, brushing imaginary dirt off his tunic. Lucky again? Lyra zipped above, giggling. He's ridiculous, but somehow amazing. Fenric frowned, his instincts warning him. Everywhere she goes, he's there, too perfect in the wrong way. Aralyn crossed to the other side, still untamed, still unaware. But Kale's silent acts of protection slowly wove a thread of invisible connection between them. As the sun set, the group made camp again. Aralyn set up a small fire. Tavik fumbled with kindling. Fenric stood guard, and Lyra zipped around playfully. Kale sat at a distance, pretending to untangle a rope, but his golden eyes never left Aralyn. He watched how she moved, how she interacted with the others, how she radiated untamed energy without realizing it. Why is he always here? Tavik whispered to Fenric. I don't know, Fenric muttered, but I don't like it. Watch closely. Kale smiled faintly to himself. He did not yet reveal the true reason for following her, nor the power she carried unknowingly on her back. He merely ensured she remained safe, impressed, and slightly curious about the clumsy stranger, who always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. Aralyn, still untamed, still unaware, laughed around the fire with her companions, oblivious to the silent golden-eyed guardian watching her every move. Morning mist clung to the forest floor, curling around the roots and rocks. Aralyn moved ahead of the group, long red hair flowing like fire in the gray light. Tavik stumbled on a hidden root, nearly tumbling down a small slope. Before anyone could react, Kale coincidentally stepped in, catching Tavik's elbow at just the right moment. Whoa, thanks, Tavik stammered, completely unaware Kale had predicted the slip. Kale brushed his hands off, pretending to be distracted. Lucky reflexes, I guess, he muttered, turning away as if nothing had happened. Aralyn glanced back briefly, noticing him closer than usual. You always seem to appear at the right time, she said, curiosity piqued. Kale smiled faintly, still keeping the playful, lost act. I just wander a lot. You never know where you might end up. Lyra zipped past, her tiny voice squeaking. He's too perfect to be lost. Fenric muttered, eyes narrowed. There's more to him than he lets on. Later, the group reached another natural obstacle, a fallen tree over a fast stream. Aralyn tested the balance first, moving gracefully. Tavik attempted to cross and almost slipped, but Kale, standing behind, gave a faint push to adjust the log. Whoa, Tavik exclaimed, amazed. That was perfect. Kale shrugged, scratching his head. I don't even know how I did that. Aralyn's eyes narrowed. Something about his clumsy behavior didn't match what she had just witnessed. You helped him, she said softly. Kale blinked, keeping up the act. Maybe it was the log itself. Perfectly balanced. I just touched it. Fenric hissed quietly, whispering to Tavik, that man is hiding something. Mark my words. Lyra zipped in front of Kale, leaving a sparkling trail. He's teasing you. I can see it. By afternoon, Aralyn climbed a rocky slope to retrieve a rare herb glowing faintly in the sun. The branch she grabbed wobbled precariously. Before she could react, Kale accidentally placed a hand near the branch, stabilizing it. She noticed the movement, but when she turned, he acted as if he hadn't done anything. Thanks, I guess, she muttered, still unsure. Kale smiled faintly. Oh, I wasn't even close to it. Must have been luck. Lyra zipped in playful circles. Yeah, right. Luck. Tavik whispered. How does he keep appearing exactly when she needs it? Fenric didn't answer, but his eyes never left Kale, suspicion growing. Kale's golden eyes flickered with amusement. He knew Aralyn noticed, and that tiny flicker of curiosity was exactly what he wanted. Evening fell. The group made camp again near a cliff overlooking the valley. Aralyn cooked over the fire, Tavik fussed with supplies, and Fenric stood watch. Kale sat at the edge of the firelight quietly observing. He didn't speak much, he didn't have to. Every gesture, every subtle move he made to help, correct, or assist without being noticed drew Aralyn's subconscious attention. She wondered briefly, why do I feel like he's everywhere? Kale smiled faintly to himself. She didn't know him. She didn't know the golden eyes beneath the hood, or the reason he followed her relentlessly. Lyra zipped close to Aralyn's shoulder. He's not normal, I swear. Watch him, Fenric murmured to Tavik. Mark my words. He's no ordinary man. Something about him is tied to her. Tavik shivered. I feel it too. Kale's lips curved slightly. He did not reveal the truth, the mark, the power. The reason he had followed her all remained secret, but the invisible thread between them grew stronger, invisible yet undeniable. The sun dipped low, painting the forest in gold and crimson. Aralyn moved with her usual untamed grace, gathering wild herbs for the evening meal. Tavik trailed nervously, muttering about insects and uneven paths, while Fenric kept his watchful gaze on the tree line. Lyra zipped playfully around, leaving sparkling trails in the fading light. Kale, still disguised as the bumbling wanderer, trailed behind, hands pretending to fumble with a leather satchel, but inside, carefully folded, was a small, hidden note, a warning from his palace. His eyes flickered as he read it quickly. An attack was imminent. The words were coded, meant only for him. He folded it and tucked it into his cloak, heart pounding. At that moment, a branch snapped behind him. Fenric's sharp eyes narrowed. Kale froze for a heartbeat, then laughed awkwardly, leaning against a tree. Ah, probably just the wind, he muttered, brushing leaves off his tunic. Tavik blinked, unconvinced. Lyra zipped closer, curious. Kale's golden eyes flickered with tension beneath his hood. He needed to return to his palace immediately, but if he moved too hastily, Aralyn might notice and the mark on her back could be exposed or endangered. As Aralyn crouched to inspect a rare herb, Kale accidentally dropped a small stone nearby, rolling it toward her feet. Watch it, she snapped, brushing it away. Kale scratched his head. Oops, didn't mean to, he said, hiding the letter further. He tilted his body, subtly blocking her view of his hands, pretending to fumble with his satchel. Fenric muttered under his breath, he's hiding something. Be careful, Aralyn. Lyra zipped between Kale and Aralyn, distractedly chattering. He's too funny. Did you see that? Kale smiled faintly to himself. Each act of distraction, each subtle movement, ensured the letter remained unseen while he planned his departure. Aralyn, untamed as ever, shrugged and continued gathering herbs, oblivious to the invisible tension surrounding her. By late afternoon, the group reached the riverbank again. Aralyn stepped on stones gracefully, while Tavik stumbled, glancing nervously at the rushing water. Kale, pretending to fumble with a stick, subtly shifted a large stone under Tavik's foot, stabilizing him. Tavik made it across safely, eyes wide with surprise. Thanks, I guess, Tavik muttered. Kale shrugged exaggeratedly. I don't know what just happened. Luck? Aralyn glanced back briefly, noticing Kale's proximity, but ignored it. She didn't know that he was protecting her. The letter still safely tucked in his cloak. Fenric whispered, something's off. That man, he's too precise for a fool. Lyra zipped excitedly, leaving glittering trails. I told you, he's hiding magic. Kale's golden eyes flickered with amusement, tension underlying every movement. He knew the attack warning in the letter demanded his return, but he couldn't leave yet, not until Aralyn was safely across the river. Night fell, stars piercing the forest canopy. Aralyn and the others had set up a small camp near a cliff overlooking the valley. Firelight danced across faces, shadows flickering on trees. Cale sat at a distance, quietly observing Aralyn, pretending to untangle his satchel, but his mind raced with urgency. The letter demanded immediate action. An attack was brewing at his palace, and he was the only one who could prevent it. Lyra zipped above, leaving sparkling trails in the night air. "He's hiding something," she whispered, almost teasing. Fenric muttered, "I've never seen him this tense." Cale's hands brushed imaginary dust from his tunic as he casually smiled. "Ah, just tired from the day," he muttered. Inside, his golden eyes burned with determination. When Aralyn drifted to sleep near the fire, unaware of the weight of the letter in Cale's possession, he quietly rose, glancing at the shadows around him. He slipped silently into the darkness, disappearing from the camp without a trace, leaving behind only the faint glimmer of a golden-eyed figure against the firelight. Aralyn awoke to the crisp morning air, her long red hair tangled around her face, glowing softly in the first light. The forest was quiet, except for the morning calls of distant birds and the faint rush of a stream. She noticed immediately Cale was gone. Tavik and Fenric were up, packing gear. Lyra zipped past, leaving glittering trails across the mist. "Where did he go?" Aralyn asked softly, her brow furrowing. Tavik shrugged nervously. "I didn't see him last night." Fenric's eyes narrowed, scanning the trees. "He wouldn't just leave. Something's off." Aralyn's mind wandered to the previous night, the subtle assistance, the moments he'd been clumsy but somehow always in the right place. Her pulse quickened. She couldn't explain why, but she felt his presence even in absence, like an invisible tether pulling at her senses. Lyra chirped, "He's hiding something. I can feel it, like magic or a trick or something." Aralyn shook her head. She brushed it off as imagination. Yet in the back of her mind, a quiet worry stirred. The safety of the mysterious man who had followed her everywhere. As Aralyn prepared to move, she noticed subtle signs, footprints that didn't match any of her companions. A faintly disturbed patch of leaves near the riverbank. He's been here," she whispered, brushing her fingers over the prints. Tavik tilted his head. "Who? Cale?" "Maybe," Aralyn replied, her gaze intense. A quiet thrill mixed with unease ran through her. Something about the way he always appeared at the right moment made her pulse race. Lyra zipped around, giggling. "I told you, he's magical or something. I can feel it in my wings." Fenric muttered, frowning. "Mark my words, Aralyn. There's more to him than you know. He's dangerous, and he's protective for a reason we don't yet understand." Aralyn's eyes narrowed, her untamed spirit stirring. She was curious, frustrated, yet unwilling to acknowledge the pull she felt. Meanwhile, Cale returned to his palace in the dead of night. Shadows stretched across the grand halls as servants slept or whispered in hushed tones. He moved silently, golden eyes sharp. The letter from his trusted informant had warned. An attack was coming, one that threatened not only him, but the entire bloodline of his family. Cale's hands brushed against the walls, tracing familiar contours. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. His mind was racing, but outwardly, he appeared calm, almost indifferent. The palace was quiet, but the tension hummed beneath the marble floors. He paused before the secret chamber, retrieving a small weapon, checking its edges. He was ready, but the threat was unknown. He muttered under his breath, "No mistakes. Not now, not ever." A servant nearly stumbled into the room, startled. Cale's golden eyes flared, a subtle intimidation in his gaze. The man backed away quickly, silent as the grave. Cale exhaled slowly, composed again, but the storm of urgency within him raged. Back in the forest, Aralyn and the group moved forward cautiously. She could still sense Kale's absence, the strange weight of missing protection, the void of unseen hands that had been guiding them. I don't like this, Tavik admitted nervously. He was reliable somehow. Aralyn's brow furrowed. I know. There is something about him I don't understand. Fenric's gaze was sharp. Keep your wits. Whoever follows him or her, we don't know what's coming. Lyra zipped closer, whispering, I can feel the tension in the air. Something's going to happen soon. Despite her untamed spirit, Aralyn felt a chill run down her spine, a mixture of curiosity and fear. Kale's presence was gone, yet his influence lingered in every safe step she had taken. Kale entered the inner chambers, finding a hidden table with intelligence, reports, and magical wards laid out by his late grandmother. The letter hinted at an imminent strike, but it was coded in ways only he could understand. He examined each line, deciphering patterns, and his expression hardened. His alpha instincts flared, calculating, predicting, strategizing. Yet he maintained a calm exterior, as if a timid, ordinary man wandering through the palace. Every so often, his mind flicked to Aralyn. The mark on her back, unknown even to her, was the key to the next stage of his plans. But for now, she remained unaware, untamed, and free, and he intended to keep it that way until absolutely necessary. Finally, after hours of preparation, Kale quietly retreated to his private chambers, the letter safely tucked away, vanishing like a shadow through the palace corridors. Morning light spilled through the dense canopy, turning dew into tiny diamonds along the forest floor. Aralyn's red hair gleamed like fire as she moved carefully, collecting herbs and scouting the path ahead. Tavik stumbled behind her, muttering about roots and slippery moss, while Fenric's sharp eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, alert for any danger. Lyra zipped between branches, leaving sparkling trails as she fluttered. I still feel him, she chirped almost teasingly. Even though he's gone, Aralyn frowned, shaking her head. I don't know what you're talking about. He's gone. I should focus on the path, not the invisible man following me. Yet her stomach tightened. Something about the empty spaces he left behind felt unnatural. Even the forest seemed quieter without him, like it had held its breath in his presence. Tavik noticed her hesitation. You're worried about him? Aralyn waved him off. Don't. Kale entered the inner sanctum, where guards and magical wards awaited the incoming threat. The enemy struck suddenly, loud, brutal, an onslaught of chaos that shook the palace walls. Kale moved with fluid precision, dodging blades and magic blasts. His focus was absolute. Every instinct of the Alpha awakened. The battle was fierce. Walls cracked under the strain, servants fled in terror, and the thunder of combat echoed through the halls. Kale's strikes were calculated but desperate. He was searching for an opening, for a moment to unleash the hidden power connected to Aralyn's mark. But the enemy was cunning, relentless, and relentless. The clash left Kale with a deep, jagged scar across his chest and arm, a reminder of how close he came to failure. His breath was ragged. He had lost nearly half the battle. When the dust settled, the palace lay in partial ruin. Kale's enemies were defeated, but the cost was high. Blood stained the floors, and the jagged scar on his chest glinted ominously under the flickering torchlight. Despite the enormity of the battle, Kale knew he couldn't reveal the truth to anyone. Aralyn and her companions would never understand the scale of what had happened, the danger, the stakes, the near loss of the power he sought. He patched his wounds, suppressing the pain, and hid the scar beneath his tunic. If anyone asked, he would claim it was from a dangerous wild animal attack. Simple and believable. No one could question him. But inside, a burning frustration grew. He had almost lost the power connected to Aralyn, and his patience was thinning. Time was slipping through his fingers. Kale returned quietly to the outskirts of the forest under the cover of night. The villagers and Aralyn's companions noticed nothing unusual. To them, he had simply disappeared again, silent as a shadow. Aralyn, Tavik, Fenric, and Lyra had no idea of the battle he had fought, nor of the scar that now marked his body. Kale kept the secret well, a silent guardian, Yet, internally, his anger and impatience were building. He needed the power hidden within Aralyn's mark, and the window to unlock it was shrinking. Every passing day without progress brought him closer to desperation. And Kale was a man who could not fail. Even in the calm of the forest, his mind raced, plotting the next move, calculating the steps required to finally awaken the latent force he had long sought. Kale retreated to a hidden vantage point near Aralyn's usual path. The scar throbbed slightly under his tunic, a constant reminder of his vulnerability. "I can't waste any more time," he whispered to himself, jaw tight. "I need it now. That power. It cannot slip away. Not her, not me, not anyone." His golden eyes scanned the forest below. Aralyn moved with her usual untamed grace, unaware that the man she felt nothing for was now scarred, frustrated, and silently guarding her for reasons beyond her understanding. The night wind rustled through his hood, whispering promises and warnings alike. Kale's resolve hardened. The mark had to be his to awaken, and nothing would stop him, even if the world didn't yet know what was at stake. Kale retreated to a hidden perch above the group, perched silently on a thick branch. His golden eyes glimmered, and a jagged scar along his chest throbbed faintly under his tunic, a reminder of the battle at the palace and how close he had come to losing everything. His mind raced, filled with frustration and urgency. He needed the latent power linked to Aralyn's mark now, before it slipped away entirely. He clenched his fists, muttering, "I cannot wait any longer. It's slipping from me. Focus, control. I cannot fail again." Lyra zipped near him, sensing the tension. "What's wrong with him?" she whispered to the forest winds, her small form glowing faintly. As the group paused to rest near a creek, Aralyn knelt to fill her water flask. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind her. Tavik yelped, but Aralyn turned swiftly, sensing the presence. Kale stepped into the clearing, pretending to be lost and weary. "Oh, I didn't expect anyone here," he stammered, voice casual. Aralyn's brow furrowed. "You again? You're always showing up." Kale scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "I just get lost easily. The forest is tricky, you know? You seem to handle it well." Aralyn rolled her eyes. "Sure, very believable." Lyra zipped past, whispering, "He's clumsy, yet somehow he always shows up. What's going on?" Kale lingered, his presence like a shadow with a golden glint. He subtly guided Aralyn away from a hidden pitfall, accidentally causing the terrain to shift, making her steps safe. Aralyn noticed, frowning. "Why do you keep saving me?" Kale feigned exasperation. I just can't help it, I guess. Luck?" Fenric muttered under his breath, narrowing his eyes. "He's no ordinary man. Watch him." Tavik shivered, sensing the aura around Kale something old, dangerous, and commanding. Even as Kale masked his interventions with clumsiness, his frustration mounted. Time was slipping. If the power didn't awaken soon, he risked losing it forever. As the sun dipped toward twilight, Aralyn set up camp with her companions. The forest grew quiet, shadows stretching long. Kale, hidden in the treetops, watched. He noted every movement, every nuance, every untamed instinct in Aralyn. He needed her mark awakened. He needed it now. A low growl echoed in the distance. Tavik froze. Fenric tensed. Lyra hovered closer to Aralyn, shimmering. Kale's golden eyes flared, alert. His mind raced with battle strategies, contingencies, and the need to control the looming power, all while maintaining the pretense of ordinary, lost traveler. The forest whispered secrets only Kale could interpret, and somewhere deep inside, he knew the moment to act was approaching. A moment that would change everything for Aralyn, whether she understood it or not. The sun broke through the dense forest canopy in soft golden streaks. Birds called from hidden branches, and a faint mist lingered near the creek where Aralyn and her companions gathered. Kale, disguised as the ordinary lost traveler, lingered nearby, pretending to trip over roots as he helped Lyra with her small errands. Each stumble was perfectly calculated. Every fall subtly nudged Aralyn away from danger, though she remained completely unaware. Aralyn laughed quietly as she straightened a tiny branch Lyra had knocked over. You really are terrible at walking in a straight line, she teased, a small smile tugging at her lips. Kale bowed awkwardly. I suppose I am. Very clumsy, yes. Lyra zipped between them, giggling, leaving tiny sparkles of light in the air. Tavik whispered to Fenrig, why does she look happy around him? She usually ignores everyone. Fenrig's jaw tightened. Be careful, Tavik. He's no ordinary man. Everything about him is calculated. Aralyn tilted her head, studying the man in the shadows. There was something frustratingly genuine in his awkward smiles, even though she refused to admit it aloud. That evening, the group settled by a small fire. Tavik poked the flames, muttering about how warm it was. Fenrig cleaned his blade quietly, eyes never leaving the forest perimeter. Lyra hovered above, softly illuminating the area. Kale sat near Aralyn, still disguised, but his presence was somehow comforting. You have a good sense for finding paths, he said, voice quiet. I wish I could do that. Aralyn looked at him in surprise. You've been following us all this time, and you wish you could find your way? She asked, amusement in her tone. Kale shrugged. I get lost often. Maybe I admire how easily you move through this forest, graceful, untamed. Aralyn felt a warmth she didn't understand. Hey you're strange, she muttered, hiding a small smile. Tavik whispered to Fenrig, she's enjoying his company. Fenrig's eyes darkened. That's exactly why we need to watch him. She doesn't know what's at stake, and he's dangerous. Kale tried to help Aralyn lift a heavy basket of herbs, pretending to struggle and almost dropping it. She laughed and grabbed the basket herself, shaking her head. You're hopeless, she said, a small spark of amusement in her eyes. How do you survive in the forest if you're this clumsy? Kale rubbed the back of his neck, feigning embarrassment. I have other skills, he replied vaguely, letting a faint smirk escape. Aralyn found herself unexpectedly enjoying his company. Despite the frustration he caused, the odd aura around him, and the many unanswered questions, she didn't know why she felt drawn to him, but she couldn't deny it. Fenrig and Tavik exchanged uneasy glances. He's getting too close, Fenrig muttered. Be careful, Aralyn. He's dangerous, and she doesn't even see it yet. Lyra zipped around, sensing the tension between human hearts, giggling quietly. It's obvious, even from here, she whispered, as the fire crackled. Kale's golden eyes flickered with impatience and hidden intensity. They're enjoying the moment. But time is slipping, he whispered to himself. The mark. It must awaken, soon. Even as Aralyn laughed and grew comfortable in his presence, he couldn't forget the scar on his chest, the palace battle, the lost power, or the approaching threats. He smiled faintly at Aralyn, masking the storm beneath. She couldn't see the frustration, the urgency, or the alpha within, but he could feel it in every movement of the forest, in every twitch of her untamed energy. He would have to act carefully, draw her in slowly, while ensuring the latent power he sought didn't slip through his fingers. As night fell and the group drifted to rest, Tavik and Fenrig whispered in hushed tones. Something isn't right with him, Tavik said nervously. Fenrig's gaze lingered on Kale. Patience. We watch, he's hiding something. Everything about him is a warning. Aralyn lay on her bed of leaves, staring at the stars above. She felt strangely calm, yet excited, a new sense of intrigue toward the man who irritated yet fascinated her. Kale, watching from a shadowed perch nearby, felt the pull of the mark intensifying, the untamed energy of Aralyn growing closer to awakening. He knew the next step would be crucial, and he was prepared to act carefully, subtly, but decisively. The sun barely pierced the thick canopy as Aralyn and her companions continued their trek. Dew clung to the grass and birdsong filled the air, but an underlying tension threaded the morning. Aralyn had begun noticing Kale's strange knack for appearing when needed, yet she refused to acknowledge it aloud. She laughed at his awkward stumbles, still unaware that every intervention was calculated. Tavik muttered, Something about him doesn't sit right. He's always around. Fenric narrowed his eyes, scanning the trees. I've never trusted a man like him, not for a second. Lyra hovered over Aralyn's shoulder, sensing the faint pull of energy she could barely describe. The forest whispers. He's no ordinary man, she said softly. Kale watched from a distance, frustration simmering. His golden eyes glinted with urgency. Every passing moment without progress edged him closer to losing the latent power hidden in Aralyn's mark. Throughout the day, Kale subtly manipulated the forest. A loose branch threatened to trip Fenric. A faint scent carried to Tavik, just enough to weaken their concentration without alarming Aralyn. He muttered under his breath, gritting his teeth. Patience is running thin. I cannot waste any more time. I must act. Aralyn, unaware, admired his clumsy heroics when he redirected her path or subtly removed hazards. Her companions, however, felt unnerved by the constant coincidences, their suspicion growing. Lyra zipped to Tavik and whispered, I don't like him. Not one bit. But Aralyn, she doesn't see it yet. By evening, Aralyn found herself looking for Kale's shadow, though she refused to admit it. His awkwardness and accidental heroics had become a strange comfort. I don't know why, but I feel safer, she admitted quietly to Lyra, who hovered nearby. Lyra's wings quivered. Don't trust him too much. The forest knows more than you. He's dangerous and he's impatient. Kale, hidden in the shadows above, clenched his fists. His jaw tightened, the faint scar on his chest throbbing. The moment had come. He could no longer wait for her latent power to awaken naturally. Night fell, and the group settled by a riverbank for rest. Tavik and Fenric kept a vigilant watch, but Kale's plan had already set into motion. Using subtle suppressive energy from his alpha essence, he weakened their companions. Fenric and Tavik's senses dulled. Lyra's wings slowed, leaving them unconscious one by one. Aralyn blinked in confusion as the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. Before she could react, Kale emerged from the darkness, his golden eyes glowing fiercely. Aralyn, it's time, he said softly, yet firmly. She struggled, but the latent exhaustion and surprise left her vulnerable. Kale lifted her gently but swiftly, moving through the trees with silent, predator-like precision. By the time the forest had fully awoken to the night's stillness, Aralyn's companions remained unconscious. Kale had kidnapped her without a trace, heading back to his palace, the first decisive step to awaken the power he sought. Kale moved silently, avoiding the forest's familiar paths, until the towering gates of his palace loomed ahead. The cold walls reflected the moonlight, and the grandeur of the place was a stark contrast to the simplicity of the forest. Aralyn, still dazed, looked around in awe. She didn't fully understand why she had been brought here, but a strange, thrilling fear threaded through her veins. Kale placed her gently on a balcony overlooking the moonlit palace gardens. You're safe here, he murmured, though his eyes betrayed an impatience and desire only he understood. She stared at him, speechless. The man she had thought awkward and clumsy had revealed a shadow of dominance and control she couldn't ignore. Kale's scarred chest, barely visible under his cloak, reflected the moonlight, a silent warning of the danger that had followed her unseen all this time. Aralyn's eyes widened as the massive doors of Kale's palace closed behind her. The hall shimmered with golden chandeliers, intricate tapestries, and polished marble floors that reflected the moonlight like a river of stars. Her pulse raced. She had never seen such wealth, such magnitude, and yet a chilling emptiness lingered in the air. Kale stood a few paces away, leaning casually against a pillar. Welcome to my home, he said quietly, his golden eyes fixed on her every movement. Aralyn stepped carefully, scanning the massive hall. Why did you bring me here? Kale's jaw tightened slightly, his tone calm but firm. You need to understand, some things can't wait. Patience is a luxury neither of us can afford. Her fingers brushed against the railing, trying to steady herself. I don't understand any of this. Kale guided her through the vast corridors, though he kept a careful distance, testing her reactions without revealing too much. Every step echoed like a warning. Aralyn's curiosity clashed with her fear. Where are we going? Kale's eyes glinted in the dim light. Somewhere you'll feel safe for now, but you must learn to trust me even if you think you don't want to. As they passed intricate tapestries depicting battles and ancient symbols, Aralyn's mind raced. She felt a strange pull in her back, though she didn't understand it, the mark that only Kale knew existed, a key to powers she had yet to comprehend. Later, Kale led her to a private chamber overlooking the palace gardens. The moonlight spilled across the room, illuminating her fiery hair in a halo of crimson. "You're safe here," he said, his voice soft but commanding. "But you must understand, the forest is not enough to protect you. Not yet." Aralyn folded her arms, her untamed spirit flaring. "I'm not a child. I can take care of myself." Kale's lips curved faintly. "I know that, which is why I brought you here to see how far your courage truly goes. I won't lie. It won't be easy. You'll need every ounce of strength, wit, and instinct." Aralyn felt a mix of frustration, awe, and undeniable curiosity. The man who had irritated her so much in the forest now commanded her full attention. Over the following hours, Kale engaged her in subtle conversations, testing her intelligence, wit, and instincts. He deliberately allowed small victories, letting her feel accomplished while secretly observing her every decision. "You're clever," he said, genuinely impressed though keeping his voice neutral. Aralyn blinked. I guess I can handle things when needed." Kale's golden eyes softened, just slightly. "Yes, but courage is not just about skill. It's about choices. And soon, you'll face choices that will define you. Choices you may not even realize you're making." Though she did not admit it, Aralyn felt a strange comfort in his presence, a pull that conflicted with her untamed nature. Though Aralyn began enjoying his company, Kale's patience was wearing thin. The power he needed from her mark remained dormant. Every laugh, every moment of comfort brought him closer to frustration. He paced the chamber quietly, muttering under his breath, "Patience? I've waited long enough. Soon it must awaken, or I risk everything." The moonlight highlighted the faint scar on his chest, a silent reminder of the palace battle and the danger he had survived. He could not afford delay. As Aralyn finally drifted to rest, Kale remained near the balcony, gazing at the moonlit gardens below. His golden eyes glinted with determination. "Soon," he whispered, almost to himself, "the power will awaken, and when it does, everything changes." Even as the night air brushed Aralyn's face, she remained unaware of the destiny tied to her mark, and of the dangerous, impatient alpha watching her every breath. The tension was electric, the calm before the storm, and the stage was set for the next decisive events. The next morning, the palace felt both endlessly vast and strangely intimate. Aralyn wandered through the high vaulted halls, her crimson hair cascading in waves down her back, brushing against golden railings. Each step echoed softly, the silence punctuated only by distant creaks of the palace settling. Kale followed, just out of her peripheral vision, pretending to be preoccupied with the morning light spilling across the marble. He let her explore freely, watching how she observed the subtle details, the carved statues, the intricate mosaics, the faint traces of past generations. Aralyn paused before a large mural, depicting a moonlit battle between a wolf and a shadowy figure. These creatures look alive," she murmured. Kale's golden eyes flickered. They were legends, stories told to guide the young or to warn them. She turned to him, curiosity in her gaze. "And do you believe them?" Kale smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made him seem approachable yet secretive. "Belief is complicated. Sometimes seeing is necessary." Meanwhile, far in the forest, Tavik and Fenric slowly awoke, their senses dulled from Kale's earlier intervention. They rubbed their eyes and realized Aralyn was missing. Panic set in immediately. "She's gone," Tavik whispered, his voice tight with worry. Fenric clenched his jaw. "He took her, I know it. That man isn't ordinary. We must find her before it's too late." Lyra hovered anxiously, flitting from branch to branch. "I can sense her energy. It's stronger, but she's trapped somewhere she doesn't know yet. The group realized the danger Aralyn faced, but they had no idea of the true threat. Kale was not only protective but needed the latent power tied to her mark. And he was still unaware that love, not proximity, was the key. Kale led Aralyn to a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Moonlight had faded, leaving soft morning shadows. He watched her quietly as she peered over the railing. "You are brave," he said casually. "Most would panic in a new place. But you observe, you assess. That is rare." Aralyn smiled faintly, a mix of pride and defiance. "I'm not afraid of a palace. I've faced worse in the forest." Kale's eyes glimmered with hidden urgency. "You may have faced worse, but not everything here is what it seems. Danger and power are intertwined, and some things awaken only under specific circumstances." She frowned, curious. "What circumstances?" Kale's lips twitched in a faint smirk, but he did not answer. The secret remained love was the key. Kale walked beside Aralyn as they explored the palace library. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with dusty tomes. He pretended to be fascinated by a book, but every glance at her measured her reactions. Every subtle movement gauged her instincts. Aralyn ran her fingers along the spines of old books, her mind drifting to the forest and her friends. "I wonder if Tavik and Fenric are okay," she murmured. Kale's eyes darkened briefly. "They will be, but you must focus. Some paths require trust, even when it feels impossible." She frowned. "Trust who?" Kale's gaze met hers, and for a heartbeat, the air felt electric. "Someone you may not expect." Aralyn shivered slightly. Something about the tone made her heart race, though she didn't understand why. By evening, Kale allowed Aralyn a private moment in the gardens. Flowers glistened with dew, the fountains whispered softly. She felt oddly calm, yet curious and drawn to the mysterious man who followed her everywhere. Kale watched silently from a shadowed archway, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Patience? It's nearly lost," he muttered. "If the power does not awaken soon, I cannot guarantee the forest's safety or hers." Aralyn glanced around, sensing someone's presence but seeing no one. "Is someone there?" she whispered. Kale stepped forward, still cloaked. "Merely the night, and perhaps someone who admires your courage." Her cheeks flushed, but she refused to show it. Unbeknownst to her, the unseen bond of the mark and latent power was subtly stirring, responding to proximity, attention, and care, though neither realized that the key to awakening was mutual love, a truth Kale's late grandmother had withheld. Night fell over the palace. Aralyn rested in her chambers, eyes tracing the moonlight streaming through tall windows. She felt strangely at ease, even as uncertainty crept in. Kale, standing silently in the shadows, allowed a faint sigh. Soon it will begin. If only she knew what her heart holds, what her mark can do. But she must learn, and I must guide. The palace echoed with silence, the tension palpable. Aralyn's friends remained, unaware of the subtle stirrings of magic and power tied to her mark, their worry growing only slightly in the forest. Kale's golden eyes glinted. "Tomorrow, patience ends. Tomorrow, everything changes." Morning light filtered through the palace windows, but Aralyn felt trapped. Kale, no longer hiding behind clumsy gestures or playful pretenses, entered her chambers with a stern, commanding presence. "You need to understand something," he said, voice low and precise. "The forest, your friends, none of it matters now. You are here, under my protection, whether you like it or not." Aralyn's eyes widened. "Protection? You kidnapped me." Kale's golden eyes flickered with impatience. "No, I brought you where you belong. You are vital to something far bigger than yourself, far bigger than love." She recoiled slightly, sensing the alpha dominance and danger she hadn't seen before. "I don't understand." Kale's jaw tightened. "You will, eventually, but first, you stay here, until I decide you've fulfilled your purpose." Kale moved her through the palace corridors, introducing her to key palace characters all loyal to him, all aware of his dangerous reputation. Lord Riven, the stern palace steward, whose icy gaze seemed to measure every action. Vaelor, the quick-witted head maid, always hovering nearby, curious yet careful not to anger Kael. Vaelor, the palace captain of guards, a massive man with scarred hands, loyal only to Kael, silently observing Aralyn's every move. Mira, a mysterious scholar who oversaw magical studies in the palace, intrigued by Aralyn but wary of Kael's impatience. Aralyn walked cautiously, absorbing the palace's grandeur and the layered tension of people who feared Kael but respected him immensely. "You are all afraid of him," she whispered to Mira. Mira's eyes flickered. "Afraid?" "Yes, but he is also brilliant and dangerous. You'll see soon enough." Kael's voice cut through the corridor, cold and precise. "Curiosity is a luxury, Aralyn. Focus instead on what is necessary." By evening, Kael made his intentions unmistakable. He led Aralyn to a private wing of the palace, heavy iron doors closing behind her. "This is where you will stay for the foreseeable future," he said, voice cold. "No one enters without my command. No one leaves without my consent." Aralyn's heart raced. "You can't just keep me here. My friends will come looking." Kael's golden eyes hardened. "They won't find you. And if they do, they will not reach you. I am ensuring the power remains mine to guide. You are necessary, Aralyn, whether you understand it or not." She struggled against the doors, but Vaelor and the palace guards were ready and watchful, ensuring Kael's words were not empty threats. Kael spent the next hours observing her subtly. He arranged small tasks walking through the gardens, exploring certain palace rooms while monitoring how she reacted to restrictions. The palace staff, and his alpha authority, Aralyn, ever untamed, began pushing boundaries. She tested locks, questioned staff, and even attempted to sneak into areas she wasn't allowed. Kael watched from shadows, a faint smirk on his lips. Clever, spirited, exactly what is required, but impatience must not lead to mistakes. Mira, the scholar, observed quietly. "She's unlike anyone I've seen. If he is not careful, she might break more than his rules." Kael's jaw tightened, revealing the tension between desire for control and the necessity of keeping the power contained. Despite Aralyn's confinement, Kael had eyes everywhere. Vaelor delivered meals, discreetly noting Aralyn's reactions. Vaelor patrolled silently, while Mira recorded subtle magical energy fluctuations in the palace. Kael whispered under his breath, pacing. "Soon, the power will awaken, but not from fear, not from obedience, only from what she refuses to see in herself or me." Aralyn, unaware, tried to make sense of the palace and her captor. Her fiery nature resisted him, but curiosity kept her near, unknowingly responding to the magical pull of her latent mark. The palace, alive with servants, guards, and subtle whispers of intrigue, became the perfect stage for Kael to test patience, courage, and the first steps toward awakening the power. 2 weeks had passed in silence. Aralyn had been locked in the private wing, confined to the same chamber, her curiosity and frustration mounting. Meals were delivered silently. Guards watched but said nothing. She felt trapped and simmering with anger. Kael returned at night, his presence announced only by the faint click of his boots on the marble floor. Aralyn froze, her pulse hammering. "You've grown restless," Kael said, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I'm not a child," Aralyn snapped. "Why are you keeping me here?" Kael's jaw tightened. "You're necessary, for more than you realize. And patience is a failing luxury I no longer have." Kael demanded privacy. The chamber was silent except for their breaths. His patience snapped. He attempted a direct method to trigger her latent power, tearing at the bindings of her clothing to expose the mark on her back, the secret that would unleash her abilities. Aralyn's eyes widened in confusion and fear. What are you doing? Are you trying to?" Kael's golden eyes burned with frustration. "No, it's not what you think. I need the power." But Aralyn couldn't see beyond her own mind. All she saw was a man violating her boundaries, and she recoiled, trying to push him away. Her mark shimmered faintly in response to his proximity and desperate energy, but it did not awaken fully. Frustrated by the failure to awaken the power, Kale's anger flared. He locked Aralyn back in the chamber, guards reinforcing the doors, leaving her in complete isolation once again. He paced the halls outside, muttering under his breath, "Patience, patience. Why is it so stubborn? The mark, why won't it obey?" Even as she screamed in frustration and anger, Kale made no move to console her. His focus was singular, the power hidden on her back, dormant but potentially world-altering. Kale finally left the wing and went directly to the grandmother's chambers, the only person who had knowledge of the mark's nature and purpose. He entered quietly, the room filled with ancient relics, scrolls, and fading candlelight. "Grandmother, the mark, it still resists me," he said, voice tight with frustration. She looked up, calm yet piercing. "Patience, Kale. You think proximity alone will awaken her? Power requires more than force, more than fear. It requires something deeper, something you are blind to." Kale's hands clenched into fists. "I don't have time for riddles. Tell me what I'm missing." Her lips curved faintly. "You think you need her to obey, but it is not obedience that awakens it. It is connection, emotion, love." Kale froze, a flicker of disbelief crossing his eyes. The truth that he needed her affection, not just her presence, was a revelation he had never anticipated. Kale returned to Aralyn's chamber, calmer now but with a storm of thoughts inside. He stood in the shadows, observing her sleeping figure. "She must love me," he whispered to himself. "No, I do not love her. I want the power, but connection, affection, that is the key." He clenched his jaw, torn between frustration, desire, and the chilling necessity of unlocking the mark. Aralyn stirred slightly, unaware of his gaze or the thoughts running through his mind. The balance of power, patience, and the hidden key love loomed silently between them, shaping the fate of both. Days passed since Kale's revelation from his grandmother. Aralyn remained locked in the palace wing, her fiery spirit undimmed despite isolation. Kale, realizing that force alone would not awaken her latent power, devised a new strategy, one that would test her emotions subtly while hiding his true intentions. He approached her chamber with calm precision, his golden eyes softening slightly, a mask he had honed over weeks of observation. "Aralyn," he said, voice carefully measured, "I owe you an apology." She looked up sharply, suspicion flashing across her green-flecked eyes. "Apology? For what?" "For everything you've suffered, for the confinement, the frustration. I should have handled this differently," Kale said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture almost foreign to his alpha demeanor. Aralyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "And why should I believe you? You've shown nothing but control and manipulation since I arrived." Kale's eyes glimmered, a subtle mix of frustration and calculation. "Because I want you to understand I am not the monster you believe me to be." To further gain her trust, Kale arranged for her friends Tavik, Fenric, and Lyra to enter the palace under strict supervision. He did not reveal the purpose, only that she was allowed to see them. The moment they stepped into her chamber, Aralyn's eyes flooded with emotion. You're safe," Tavik exclaimed, rushing toward her. Fenric hugged her tightly, and Lyra fluttered near, casting curious glances at Kale. Kale observed quietly, maintaining his mask of concerned guardian. "I have ensured your safety. You are no longer in danger." Aralyn's friends glanced around warily, noting the guards, the iron doors, and the tension in Kale's posture. But Kale's calm demeanor and words masked his true intent. Aralyn's heart warmed slightly, though she didn't yet trust him. She appreciated seeing her friends, and for a moment, Kale allowed himself to study her emotions. Kale spent days orchestrating small moments of apparent care, bringing her meals personally, showing her secret corners of the palace, and subtly complimenting her intelligence and courage. "You are remarkable," he said one evening, sitting across from her as she examined a set of ancient texts. "Few could maintain composure in these circumstances." Aralyn studied him cautiously. "And yet, you still keep me locked here, manipulate me, and lie constantly." Kale smiled faintly, carefully. All I do is to prepare you, protect you. You must understand I am only doing what is necessary. Aralyn frowned, her heart torn between cautious hope and simmering suspicion. She began to feel the first flickers of doubt and curiosity toward Kale, not realizing that every gesture, every word, was calculated to coax her emotions, to draw out the latent power. But the mark did not awaken. Not yet. Kale continued weaving lies and manipulations. He would allow her friends to think she was safe, whisper half-truths about dangers outside, praise her while hiding his impatience. He even staged moments where he appeared vulnerable, pretending his frustrations were over external matters, drawing her concern. Aralyn, untamed and defiant, began to respond to his gestures. Feeling the first twinge of trust, she helped him in small ways, offering tea, organizing the library, even speaking to him during discussions about palace defenses. His grandmother's words haunted him. Connection, not fear, awakens the power. Kale retired to his private chamber that night, pacing. He clenched his fists, muttering under his breath. She is responding, but not enough. The power, the mark. It cannot sense fear. It cannot sense proximity. It needs something else. The palace was silent. Guards, servants, and even Mira had noticed subtle shifts in Aralyn's demeanor, calm but alert, curious but resistant. Kale's patience was wearing thin. Perhaps I must escalate, he whispered, glancing at his reflection. But I must tread carefully. The moment I push too far, she may resist entirely, and I cannot afford that. Outside, Aralyn slept, exhausted from the emotional tug-of-war. She didn't know her heart had been carefully manipulated, and she didn't know that Kale's calculated lies were all part of a larger plan to awaken her latent power. Kale sat in his private chamber, staring at the flickering candlelight. His mind was a whirlwind of calculation, irritation, and obsession. The mark on Aralyn's back still shimmered faintly whenever he came near, but it refused to respond fully. Every calculated interaction, every orchestrated moment of care had failed to awaken the power. She resists, or perhaps, he murmured, jaw tight, she does not love me. Not truly. Not in a way that the mark can sense. Outside, Aralyn walked the palace gardens, unaware of the depth of Kale's observation. Her red hair gleamed in the moonlight, her spirit untamed, her mind restless. She spoke to herself softly, pacing among the marble fountains. I will not be broken. I will not be tamed, she whispered, unaware that Kale's eyes were following every step from a shadowed balcony above. Kale continued orchestrating small moments of apparent care and connection. He would allow her friends to visit, smiling politely as he directed guards to ensure everything was safe. He staged time where he shared meals with her, listening intently as she spoke of dreams, frustrations, and moments from her life. He offered subtle guidance, gently correcting mistakes, praising her, all while maintaining his alpha dominance. Yet, every time he thought he had drawn her closer, the mark remained dormant. His frustration built, though he hid it beneath a mask of patience. Aralyn noticed the kind gestures, but she still sensed the controlling, the way the palace seemed orchestrated to keep her emotions in check. Kale began testing emotional boundaries, attempting subtle manipulations to see if Aralyn could be pushed toward feelings of attachment. He allowed her small victories and independence, praising them quietly. He staged minor dangers outside the palace walls, orchestrating her friends' reactions so she would feel fear mixed with admiration for his protection. He whispered half-truths about the dangers that only he fully understood. Aralyn began to feel the first twinges of trust, but it was mixed with suspicion and defiance. She would not allow herself to fully rely on him, nor understand the true nature of the mark. Kale watched her from the shadows, muttering, closer, but still, not enough. It is not love, it is manipulation. It will not respond to lies. I cannot afford failure. Kale stormed into his grandmother's chambers, the golden embroidery of her ancient robes catching the candlelight. His jaw was tight, hands clenching involuntarily. She will not awaken. The mark, it mocks me. He spat, pacing. His grandmother regarded him quietly, her eyes sharp, piercing through his fury. Kale, you've been patient, persistent, but you lack vision. I've done everything. Lies, care, manipulation. Nothing works. Kale's voice cracked with frustration. She leaned forward, voice calm but commanding. You want the power? You want her mark to yield? Then you must do what the mark demands. You must wife her. Make her yours, not as a tool, not as prey, but as your equal. Only then will the power respond. Kale froze, a dark storm flickering in his golden eyes. I marry her? Do you hear yourself? She is untamed, wild. Wildness can be tamed only by trust. Kale, and if you force it now, it will bend, not break. But only if you accept the rules, his grandmother said, her words unyielding. Kale clenched his fists, breathing hard. Rage, frustration, and obsession collided. Yet he knew he had no choice. The mark required it, and the grandmother's words were final. Within a week, Kale orchestrated a ceremony that shocked the palace. Aralyn was brought to the grand hall, her red hair cascading over her shoulders, untamed spirit hidden beneath the luxurious silks and ceremonial attire. She struggled internally, her heart pounding. I never agreed to this, she whispered to herself, voice trembling. Kale approached, silent, eyes cold and golden. The officiant spoke, and in the grandeur of the hall, Kale placed the ceremonial ring on her finger, sealing the marriage by authority, not consent. The palace whispered, but Kale's mind was singular. He did not desire her body, nor the warmth of union, not yet. For him, this was strategy, control, and the next step toward the mark. Aralyn's untamed spirit flickered, her pride bristling. The cage of status and obligation overshadowed her wildness, but her mind and heart still roared silently with defiance. After the ceremony, Kale kept his distance. He did not touch her, did not claim her bed, did not display passion. Instead, he trained rigorously in the palace grounds, honing his strength, played strategic games of war with generals and advisors, walked the gardens at night alone, observing the palace grounds. Aralyn tried to approach him several times, her curiosity and frustration mounting. Why won't you even speak to me? She asked once, voice sharp. Kale did not answer directly. He would simply nod once, then walk away, leaving her simmering in confusion and curiosity. Aralyn, though bound by marriage and palace walls, refused to yield entirely. She wandered the halls, tested boundaries with palace staff, and refused to conform fully to Kale's imposed structure. Her friends visited occasionally, noting her subtle frustration and controlled defiance. She remained untamed, a spark of rebellion, flickering under layers of ceremonial obedience. Kale noticed every subtle movement, every small act of defiance. He smiled faintly in the shadows, calculating. Patience? This wildness is necessary. She must bend, but not break, the mark. It waits for mutual surrender, not forced subjugation. Even in this forced union, Kale's obsession grew, and his golden eyes betrayed hints of something he had never felt before. Fascination. The palace seemed alive with whispers. Courtiers, servants, and even Kale's advisors could sense the tension between the newly married couple. Though Kale never showed intimacy, his presence dominated every corner of the palace. Aralyn wandered the corridors with her friends Tavik and Lyra, discussing the subtleties of palace life. I don't know how he keeps his composure, Tavik murmured, watching Kale pass through the grand hall with his usual sharp-eyed grace. He's dangerous, but calculated. Lyra nodded, her gaze lingering on Kale from a distance. And yet, there is something different about how he looks at her, almost fascinated. But it doesn't make her safe. Aralyn smirked faintly, brushing back her long red hair. Fascination doesn't scare me. I don't bend for anyone. Kale, from a shadowed balcony, observed silently. Her words stung, but he hid it. Good, she must resist even now. Only then will the mark sense anything when the time comes. She must feel real emotion. Kale began orchestrating more intimate, controlled moments designed to provoke small, emotional responses. Without forcing closeness, he allowed Aralyn to explore the palace library, quietly watching as she marveled at ancient tomes. During dinner, he spoke to her briefly, teasing her intellect with riddles and clever wordplay. He would stand silently nearby as she interacted with friends, letting his presence loom but never overtly intervening. Aralyn felt a strange curiosity mixed with irritation. He never touched her, never claimed her space, but somehow, she felt his influence everywhere. Why does he act so distant? She asked Lyra one evening. He could control me, scare me, but he doesn't. Why? Lyra shrugged. Maybe he's waiting, or maybe he's testing you. Kale, perched in the shadows, clenched his jaw. Testing her, yes, but the mark still would not respond. She must choose, not be coerced. Kale knew that she needed to feel real vulnerability for the mark to awaken. He orchestrated minor palace threats, controlled scenarios where Aralyn's friends were briefly endangered, forcing her to act with courage and emotion, but always under his careful supervision. Tavik narrowly avoided a staged accident in the training courtyard. Lyra was trapped briefly in the library's upper balcony, forcing Aralyn to intervene. Every action, every spark of fear or courage, Kale observed quietly. Yet, the mark did not stir. His frustration grew. She is clever, resilient, untamed, but the power will not respond to staged fear or concern. It must be real, mutual. Love, he muttered, pacing his chamber. Aralyn, unaware of the true design, only saw Kale as an enigmatic, powerful, and frustrating presence, alternately shadowed in her life and teasingly close. The palace grew tense as Kale's obsession with the mark intensified. He spent nights in his chambers reviewing ancient texts, family records, and magical scrolls, seeking hidden clues about how to awaken her latent power. Aralyn grew restless in her own confinement, her untamed spirit bristling. Friends observed subtle changes in Kale's behavior, quiet moments of attention, faint glimmers of fascination, but always unpredictable, always controlled. The power remained dormant. Not a flicker, not a shimmer. Kale muttered, frustrated, it cannot be forced. It requires connection, emotion, love, true, mutual love. She must choose me, as I must choose her. But the moment I allow desire, the risk is immense. He stared at the faint glow of her mark through a crystal lens, noting how it shimmered slightly at times, yet refused to activate fully. The palace was quiet, yet tension hung like a thick fog. Kale prowled the corridors late at night, senses sharp, every shadow a potential danger. He had received reports of small intrusions near the outer walls, spies or thieves who dared to test the palace's defenses. Aralyn wandered the gardens, restless, her long red hair glowing under the silver moonlight. The air smelled of jasmine and frost, and she felt a strange thrill in the emptiness around her. Unbeknownst to her, Kale had ordered guards to subtly shadow her, testing both her courage and her reactions. He wanted to see her instincts, her spirit, without revealing himself. He whispered under his breath, pacing in the shadows. She must remain untamed, but her heart, it will bend eventually. The mark, it will wait. Kale orchestrated a rare encounter. Aralyn's friends Tavik and Lyra were threatened by minor, controlled events, forcing Aralyn to act. He remained hidden, letting her courage shine through. She rushed to their aid, showing intelligence, courage, and emotional depth. Kale observed every movement, his frustration and fascination mixing. For a brief moment, he almost revealed his true identity to her, but he restrained himself, keeping the ruse of a regular stranger in play. Aralyn's friends whispered afterward, "She is extraordinary. Even without knowing it, she dominates every situation." Kale's golden eyes glimmered. "Yes, extraordinary, but still not mine. Not yet." Kale, recognizing the need to test emotional boundaries, orchestrated a private encounter in the library. He approached Aralyn, pretending to care, to apologize for his distant behavior. "Aralyn, he began, voice low, almost gentle, "I know I've seemed cold. I want to understand you better." Aralyn narrowed her eyes, suspicion flaring. Why now, after everything you've done? He smiled faintly, golden eyes glinting with hidden intentions. Because even power has its limits without understanding. She felt a strange mixture of irritation and curiosity, a spark she could not name. Yet she remained defiant, untamed, refusing to let herself be drawn in fully. Cale turned away, hiding his growing fascination. Patience? Only patience. One day, she will understand, or the mark will not respond at all. Over the following days, Cale continued subtle acts of care without claiming proximity. He adjusted her chair discreetly during council meetings, left small gifts of books and notes near her quarters, observed her from shadows, quietly smiling at her untamed reactions. Aralyn noticed these gestures but could not trust them fully. Her untamed nature flared. She resented the manipulation, yet couldn't deny the small warmth she felt when he acted without intimidation. Cale whispered into the night, pacing the palace halls. Closer, almost, but still not enough. Love cannot be forced. It must be mutual. The mark waits patient, cunning, eternal. Cale's obsession grew. Aralyn's defiance remained. Their relationship became a delicate dance of proximity and distance. He would allow her small freedoms, testing her limits. She would respond with subtle defiance, teasing, and occasional irritation. Their interactions were fraught with tension, curiosity, and growing fascination. Yet the mark stayed dormant. Cale's frustration now mixed with an unfamiliar emotion, a faint pull toward her beyond strategy. He shook his head, hiding the thought. No, this is not love, not yet. The mark does not lie. I cannot fail. Aralyn, unaware of the stakes, felt a strange flutter in her chest whenever he lingered nearby, her untamed spirit clashing with confusion and curiosity. The palace did not feel like a prison anymore, not because the doors were open, not because Aralyn was free, but because silence had begun to change shape. For days after the forced marriage, everything remained distant between them. The halls echoed with footsteps that never met. Servants whispered, guards bowed. Power stayed heavy in the air, and yet, something invisible started shifting. Aralyn lived in the eastern wing, where tall windows spilled gold light every morning across cold marble floors. At first, she treated the palace like a battlefield. She spoke little, ate slowly, watched everyone, trusted no one. Her untamed spirit had not died, it had only folded its claws inward. Each night she stood by the balcony, red hair flowing against moonlight, staring into lands she did not recognize but somehow felt tied to. The wind here felt different, thicker, like it carried old secrets, and always, she felt watched. Not by guards, by him, but he never came. Not until the seventh night. Alpha Vaelor had turned colder after the marriage. Not cruel, colder. He trained endlessly in the southern yard, blade clashing against steel until sparks jumped into the dark. His scars still burned from the last war, but his mind burned more. The mark was still asleep. Weeks had passed, and nothing. His grandmother's words echoed. Power does not obey chains. It awakens only when the heart opens. Vaelor hated that sentence. He had ruled armies, broken kingdoms, outplayed enemies, yet this single woman stood between him and the destiny he'd hunted his entire life, and worse, she was beginning to exist in his thoughts without permission, not as power, not as a tool, but as presence. Her silence haunted him more than screams ever could. So that night, against instinct, he went to her chambers. Aralyn heard the door before she saw him. She didn't turn. Have you come to command me again? She asked quietly. Vaelor stopped. Her voice was steady, but wounded. I came to talk. She laughed softly, bitter. Kings don't talk, they take. That sentence struck deeper than any blade. He stepped closer, slow, careful, not armored, not royal, just a man in dark linen with tired eyes. You hate me. I fear you, she corrected. And fear lasts longer. Silence settled. Vaelor looked at her red hair catching moonlight, the same way it had the first day he followed her through the village, pretending to be lost, pretending to be harmless. He remembered her laughter then. Now she did not laugh. I did not bring you here to break you, he said. She finally turned. Then why does everything feel broken? He had no answer ready, because the truth scared him more than war ever did. So he spoke softer. You are not a prisoner, Aralyn. You are protected. Protection without choice is a cage. Another hit. Vaelor exhaled slowly. You still want to run? Yes. And if I let you? She hesitated. That hesitation surprised them both. I don't know, she admitted. And for the first time since her kidnapping, honesty entered the room. From that night forward, Vaelor changed small things, not dramatically, but deliberately. He stopped posting guards at her door. He let her walk the gardens alone. He allowed her friends to stay in the palace longer. He began eating in the same hall, not across kingdoms of space, but a few seats away. Sometimes they didn't talk, sometimes they did. And slowly, Aralyn noticed something dangerous. The alpha who terrified her was also deeply lonely. He listened when she spoke. He remembered small things. How she liked tea with crushed berries. How she hated cold mornings. How she always watched the sky before sleeping. And Vaelor hated himself for it, because every kindness weakened his original plan. The mark still slept, but something else began waking. Meanwhile, Aralyn's heart began betraying her mind. She still remembered fear, still remembered being taken, but now she also remembered moments. Vaelor standing in rain without a crown. Vaelor watching the stars silently beside her. Vaelor turning away when her emotions grew too close. He confused her, and confusion is the first step toward attachment. One evening, she whispered to herself, "Why does the monster look human lately?" And she hated that part of herself for wondering. That night, the wind shifted, the palace lights flickered, and beneath Aralyn's gown, the mark on her back tingled. Not awake, not glowing, but listening. Somewhere in the shadows, Vaelor felt it too. And for the first time since destiny chose him, he was afraid of what might happen if she truly fell in love with him. Love did not arrive in the palace. It crept, quietly, like mist slipping through cracks in stone. Aralyn did not wake one morning suddenly caring for Vaelor. That would have been too easy, too false. What she felt instead was far more dangerous. She began to notice him, not admire, not trust. Notice the way his shoulders stiffened whenever someone spoke of power, the way he never smiled unless he was alone, the way command exhausted him more than battle ever did. Hatred still lived inside her, sharp and ready, but hatred, when left too long in silence, begins to ask questions. Why had he stopped forcing control? Why did he keep his distance after marriage? Why did he look at her like someone remembering a mistake instead of enjoying victory? Those questions followed her through the halls, and she hated herself for asking them. Aralyn trained in the palace courtyard now, not because Vaelor asked, because she refused to be fragile. Steel clashed in her hands. Her movements were wild, untrained, emotional. She fought like someone punishing the air. Vaelor watched from the terrace, not as alpha, as witness. When her blade slipped and cut her palm, blood traced down her fingers. Before she could react, he stepped forward. "Don't move. I didn't ask for help. I didn't offer pity." He wrapped her hand in linen, slow, controlled, respectful. Their fingers brushed. Electric. She pulled away instantly. "Don't confuse care with forgiveness." Vaelor met her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness." Good, but her heartbeat betrayed her calm, and she hated that too. Vaelor was losing battles inside himself. He still told himself she was power, still told himself destiny demanded her presence. Yet every time Aralyn turned away from him, something inside his chest tightened, not ambition, but regret. At night he stood on the tower, remembering the girl she used to be before fear hardened her. He remembered her laugh in the village, her sarcasm, her defiance. Now she was quieter, and silence felt like accusation. One night he whispered into the dark, "I never meant to turn you into this," and the wind carried no forgiveness. Days passed, not dramatic, not romantic, human. Sometimes Aralyn joined him at council meals and spoke only when required. Sometimes Vaelor escorted her through the gardens and said nothing. But silence began feeling less like war and more like shared exile. They both lived trapped in choices they hadn't wanted. And strange things happen when two prisoners share the same walls. One evening, rain fell softly over the palace roofs. Aralyn stood beneath shelter watching it. Vaelor approached but stopped beside her, not behind. I used to think rain was weakness, he said. She glanced sideways. Why? It slows armies. She smiled faintly. It heals land. Their eyes met. Not love, not trust, but alignment. For the first time, they saw the world from the same angle. That night Aralyn dreamed, not of escape, not of fear, but of standing beside Vaelor while storms gathered and power slept beneath, her skin like a reluctant animal. She woke angry, because dreams do not lie, and part of her was beginning to accept him. She walked to the balcony, gripping stone. I should hate you, she whispered. Behind her, Vaelor's voice came quietly. I know. She turned sharply. Then why does it feel like my heart is forgetting how? Vaelor didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was dangerous. Because hatred gets tired, he said. And hearts don't obey revenge forever. Tears burned in her eyes. Not because she loved him, but because she feared she might one day stop trying not to. Still, the mark did not glow. It did not awaken. It did not move. Because affection is not love, understanding is not devotion, and survival is not surrender. Their hearts were circling each other but still armored, still guarded, still wounded. Love had not arrived, only its shadow. That night, Vaelor realized something that frightened him more than losing power. He was no longer trying to make Aralyn love him. He was trying to deserve it. And Aralyn realized something even worse. The man who once ruined her life was slowly becoming the one she looked for in every room, and that scared her more than captivity ever did. The palace had always felt like a fortress. Marble floors that gleamed like cold sunlight, hallways that whispered secrets of ages past, guards that bowed but watched with suspicion, servants that moved silently like shadows, carrying trays of gold and silver, eyes always flicking in nervous arcs. But on that night, the air itself felt wrong. Aralyn had returned from the gardens, her hair wet from a sudden rain, droplets glinting like molten fire in the lantern's golden glow. Her mind had been elsewhere, thinking about the strange pull she felt toward Vaelor, the way his presence lingered like a shadow on her senses, a shadow she couldn't touch, couldn't name, couldn't trust. She had no idea, of course, that the mark on her back hidden beneath her gown was waiting, listening, sleeping. That invisible thread of power would awaken only when hearts bled together, not because of fear or coercion, and neither she nor Vaelor knew how close or far they truly were. The first sign came with a subtle click. A door that should have been locked swayed. Guards whispered to one another in hurried tones. A servant stumbled past, face pale, eyes wide. Something had breached the palace's sanctity, and the halls felt suddenly smaller, crowded by shadows. Vaelor did not appear immediately. He was somewhere in the southern wing, training in the dimly lit courtyard, every strike of his blade a release of the tension that coiled in his chest. Yet his instincts, sharpened by years of battles, told him something had gone wrong. Aralyn, unaware of the danger, stepped lightly toward her chambers. She paused when she noticed a guard crouching near the stairwell, whispering frantically. Something's wrong, he said, barely above a breath. They've infiltrated the West Wing. Her stomach tightened, her pulse sped. She should have been afraid, but what surprised her more was the sudden, unbidden thought, I wish Vaelor were here. Vaelor arrived moments later, long coat whipping behind him, eyes scanning like twin hawks. His steps were silent, but his presence pressed down on the palace like gravity. Stay in your chambers, he commanded, voice low, steady, not angry, but firm. Aralyn hesitated. Something in the tone made her obey immediately, though she would have normally protested. He moved past her, into the hall, and immediately sensed it. Footsteps where there should be none, whispers in corners that should have held silence, a shadow that moved against the light. Vaelor's mind raced. He did not think of her as weak, never that, but her safety now became more than strategy. It was instinct, a primal drive he could not deny. The intruders were not random, not mere thieves. They were from the council, a faction within the palace who believed Vaelor's obsession with the Luna would bring ruin. They wanted him distracted, weakened, humiliated. Vaelor struck swiftly, a shadow among shadows, disarming, disabling, his movements precise but restrained. Every strike avoided lethal damage. He wanted information. Aralyn watched from the balcony that overlooked the hall, heart hammering. She couldn't help it. Fear and fascination tangled inside her chest like coiled snakes. Each time Vaelor's cloak moved, each time his eyes caught the faint glimmer of moonlight, her pulse betrayed curiosity, admiration, and something else she refused to name. The council members tried to flee. Vaelor cornered them, every movement sharp, terrifying, and yet he left them alive. The palace itself seemed to breathe, tremble, as if acknowledging his dominion. And still, the mark remained silent. Hours later, silence returned. The council conspirators were imprisoned. Guards restored order. Candles burned low in the night. Vaelor finally approached Aralyn, who had descended cautiously from the balcony. "You were watching," he said, tone neutral, though his eyes flickered like storm clouds. "I couldn't look away," she admitted. Her words were soft, almost lost to the echoing hall. He studied her, his expression unreadable. "Fear keeps you sharp, but curiosity," he paused. "Curiosity can be dangerous." Aralyn's chest tightened. She did not yet understand why, but she felt it, an invisible thread tugging, pulling her closer to him, even as hatred and distrust still coiled within her. Vaelor let silence stretch. He did not touch her, did not speak further, and yet the message was clear. The palace had been violated, and only he could protect her, and only he understood the consequences. For the first time, Aralyn felt a strange, fragile tether of reliance on him, and Vaelor, standing in the dim golden light, felt the faintest pulse of something unnameable. Not power, not love, not yet, but a whisper, a spark. That night, she slept uneasy, dreams filled with corridors of shadow, whispers of betrayal, and the haunting figure of Vaelor standing silently in the moonlight. And somewhere, hidden beneath the fabric of her gown, the mark shifted slightly, as if sensing the first threads of what was to come. Not love, not yet, but the start of a connection powerful enough to change destiny. The palace was quiet, but it never truly slept. Even in the gilded corridors, under the golden moonlight spilling through high windows, shadows whispered. The night smelled of wet stone, faint lavender from the eastern gardens, and the lingering tension of unspoken truths. Aralyn had begun to notice him, not as the alpha who had kidnapped her, not as the man who ruled the palace with fear, but as a presence she could not ignore. And Vaelor, he noticed her too. He hated himself for noticing. Vaelor had never admitted weakness, not to anyone, not to himself. Yet that evening, as Aralyn trained alone in the palace yard, moving her blade through precise, angry motions, he found himself watching. Every swing, every misstep, every breath drew his attention, and when her hand bled, he almost ran to her side. Almost. He hated that he almost cared. "I am alpha," he reminded himself. "I do not feel. I conquer." But still, when she flinched at a sudden noise, he tensed, his jaw clenched, his heart buried beneath scars. Ambition and cold control betrayed him. Aralyn hated him. She had every reason to. Kidnapped, controlled, married without choice, forced into a life she had never asked for. And yet, every time he protected her in subtle ways, moving a guard's path, standing silently between her and danger, she felt something stir inside her, something she refused to name. "He will never respect me," she whispered in the quiet of her chamber. "I cannot, I will not." And yet, she could not stop noticing the way his dark cloak fell around him, the way the golden light caught his sharp features, the quiet weight he carried in silence. It happened one evening in the palace library. Aralyn was searching for a book on the history of the mark, though she did not know its meaning, when a sudden crash of wind blew several pages from the shelf. Before she could react, Vaelor had caught them midair. not to show strength, not to display control. He caught them, handed them back to her, and in that brief instant, their fingers brushed. The contact was electric. Vaelor's eyes widened. He hated it. Aralyn's pulse raced. She hated that too. I thank you, she said quickly, turning away, cheeks burning. Vaelor did not speak. He merely lingered, a heartbeat too long before retreating into the shadows of the shelves. That heartbeat lingered in both their minds far longer than the contact itself. Days passed. The palace, once a cage of fear and control, now felt like a stage for quiet collision. Aralyn would sense him before he spoke. Vaelor would notice her even when he pretended to be elsewhere. Neither admitted it. Neither could. Hate and betrayal were too sharp. Yet every small act of care, every shared glance in golden moonlight, every unspoken warning created tension neither could ignore. The mark on her back tingled, sometimes subtle, almost mocking. It whispered, not in light but in sensation. The power slept, but the connection was stirring. Vaelor continued to behave coldly in public, dismissive, commanding. He did not want her to see the threads of longing twisting his chest. She noticed, and she believed it. He still does not respect me. He only uses power. He only manipulates. And yet, she lingered in his presence when she could, watching his actions, trying to decipher the contradictions. They circled one another, a dance of hatred and attraction. The palace itself seemed to hum with the tension, walls whispering, floors creaking, moonlight tracing golden paths across their shadowed movements. That night, as the golden moonlight bathed the palace in warmth, Vaelor finally whispered to himself, I hate that I think of her. Hate it, hate it. And Aralyn, curled on her bed, whispered into the shadows, I hate that I care, more than I should. The mark slept, the power waited, and the first threads of love hidden beneath layers of fear, betrayal, and stubborn pride began weaving silently between them. Neither knew it yet, but the palace already did. The palace was silent, not the kind of silence that comforts, not the kind that soothes, but the kind that presses against your ears, makes every heartbeat sound like a drum. Aralyn walked through the corridors, her red hair catching the soft golden light of lanterns. Each step echoed in the marble, a reminder that she was still trapped. And Vaelor? He was watching, always, from the shadows, from the balconies, from behind pillars that should have hidden him. He hated it. Hated how he felt when she moved without him noticing. Hated how the tension in her posture drew him in, though he told himself it was only instinct. One evening, she had dared to wander into the western wing alone. Drawn by curiosity about the palace's history, Vaelor followed, not openly, not to intimidate, but to protect, though he refused to admit it even to himself. She sensed him before he arrived. Her hand tightened around the railing as he stepped silently behind her. Stop following me, she said without turning. He chuckled softly, a sound that was dangerous because it held amusement and something darker. I am not following, he said. I am, ensuring your safety. Her laugh was bitter. Your safety or mine? Both, he replied after a long moment, almost whispering. That night, Vaelor lost patience, not entirely, but the restraint he had maintained for weeks cracked. A servant had moved dangerously close to her. Unaware of the intruder in the palace, Vaelor struck silently, taking control of the situation with precision, yet again saving her life without her knowing. When Aralyn saw the servant retreating, she spun around to confront Vaelor. You interfere in everything, she shouted, eyes blazing. I interfere in what matters, he said quietly, tone clipped. I told you you're not safe here alone. Her chest tightened. She hated him in that moment, and yet, she hated herself more for the flicker of relief she felt. One night, Vaelor found Aralyn gazing out at the moonlit gardens. He stepped closer, slow, careful, not imposing, not commanding, just present. She stiffened, ready to lash out, but he did not move past the shadows of the balcony. Do you sleep? He asked softly. Sometimes, she replied, voice low, eyes on the garden. You dream? Yes, she whispered. but I don't like the answers. He remained silent, but the tension in his shoulders softened slightly, not entirely, but enough. And for the first time, he felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with power. He hated it. Beneath her gown, the mark stirred faintly. It had not awakened. It had not glowed, yet it reacted to the tension, the frustration, the unresolved conflict between them. A whisper of potential, a reminder that the power would not yield to fear, only to true, mutual vulnerability. Aralyn did not look at him as he retreated into the shadows, yet a part of her wanted to. Vaelor did not glance back, but his thoughts betrayed him. I cannot control this. I cannot control her. The words remained unspoken. Hatred, curiosity, attraction, fear, all intertwined, all unacknowledged. The palace hummed with anticipation, the silent pulse of something waiting, something inevitable. And neither of them knew. The moment of fracture was closer than they imagined. The palace at dawn was not peaceful. It was alive, breathing, watching. The golden light fell across marble floors, painting the corridors in streaks of warmth and shadow. Aralyn moved quietly through the halls, hair like fire brushing against the cold stone walls. Each step was measured, cautious. Not because she feared Vaelor, she had long since ceased fearing him, but because every shadow could hide something unexpected. Every moment could shift her precarious world. Vaelor was already awake, pacing in the northern tower, mind restless. He had trained through the night, yet sleep had not touched him. Not since the betrayal. Not since the mark had stirred faintly beneath Aralyn's gown. He hated how much attention he paid to her. He hated that he noticed the way she tilted her head and thought. He hated that her laughter, sharp, untamed, unbroken, made his chest tighten in ways he refused to admit. I do not love her. He repeated it like a mantra. I only need her power. And yet, every silent glance she cast toward him chipped at his conviction, like water against stone. Meanwhile, Aralyn trained in the courtyard. Her blade struck the target again and again. Her body burned with effort. Her mind, however, burned brighter. Why does he linger in my thoughts? She whispered to herself, gripping the hilt. Why does his presence feel heavier than his threats? She hated herself for these questions, hated that curiosity had crept past her walls, hated that she even noticed the subtle shifts, the moments when Vaelor seemed to step closer than required, yet never fully revealing himself. And she still did not know the truth about the mark on her back, the mark that could awaken power beyond imagination, power that would bind them, whether they wanted it or not. It happened without warning. A servant had accidentally dropped a tray of crystal glasses near the courtyard stairs. The crash would have injured her, but Vaelor was there, not moving quickly, not commanding with fury, just appearing. He blocked the path without a word, hands steady, stance firm, eyes cold, and yet there was something else almost imperceptible in the way he lingered. Aralyn froze, her heart hammering. You, she started. You were here. He didn't answer, only turned slightly, letting the light catch his face in a way that made her forget for a moment what she hated about him. And he hated himself for that. Hate is easier than this, he muttered inwardly. That night, in the quiet of her chamber, Aralyn lay awake. The mark on her back tingled faintly, almost mockingly. She rubbed her shoulders, thinking it was stress. Vaelor, in the shadowed tower, stared at the moon. He could feel it too, not the mark itself, but a pull, a subtle vibration, a whispering tug he couldn't name. Soon, he thought, soon it would be mine, and yet, why does my chest tighten when I think of her? The next day brought visitors. Investors from distant lands arrived unexpectedly. Their presence meant to discuss trade, but their attention immediately shifted toward Aralyn. Curious eyes murmured compliments, subtle questions about her relationship with Vaelor. Vaelor did not move at first. He allowed it, but his gaze never left her. Aralyn caught his eye and froze. The way he looked at her, protective, almost possessive, made her pulse quicken. He doesn't respect me, she thought. Or does he? And just like that, the palace shifted again. Threats, curiosity, desire, and tension all tangled in the air like storm clouds. By nightfall, both of them were exhausted. Vaelor, pacing silently, felt the first cracks of admission forming in his chest. Aralyn, staring at the moon from her balcony, felt the threads of attraction tighten against her will. They had not spoken of love. They had not shared a word of vulnerability. Yet the palace itself seemed to recognize a truth neither could name. Hate and desire are dangerously intertwined, and somewhere beneath her gown, the mark pulsed faintly, not awakened, not glowing, just waiting. The palace lay in the soft embrace of twilight. Shadows stretched long across the marble floors. Lanterns flickered, spilling pools of golden warmth. The wind whispered through the open balconies, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens below. Aralyn moved carefully, her bare feet brushing the stone. Her hair red as embers flowed behind her like a trail of fire, catching the last rays of the dying sun. She had trained harder than ever that day, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. Her muscles ached, her chest burned, but the ache in her heart was sharper the ache of tension. Unspoken words and a pull she refused to acknowledge. Vaelor watched her from the shadows of the balcony, cloaked, silent, commanding. Every movement of hers, every blink, every breath drew his gaze. He hated himself. I am the alpha. I am the master of this palace. I do not feel. Yet every fiber of his being screamed otherwise. Aralyn paused mid-step, sensing the weight of his stare. Her chest tightened. She hated that she even noticed. She hated the electricity that sparked when their eyes met. She hated the warmth that crept into her limbs. That evening, a minor accident occurred in the southern courtyard. A servant stumbled, a lantern tipped, fire threatening to spread to the scrolls and tapestries. Vaelor moved faster than anyone could follow. Shadow and steel, he extinguished the flames, moved the servant out of harm's way, and restored order in silence. Aralyn had witnessed it all. She stepped closer, heart pounding. You, she whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and awe. You saved them. Why? Vaelor's eyes met hers, piercing, conflicted. Because they matter, he said, voice low. Because you matter. Her chest tightened further. Her knees threatened to buckle. She wanted to scream at him for kidnapping her, for controlling her, for everything he had taken, and yet, the words would not come. Days passed. Their interactions grew taut with unspoken truths. When she moved, he followed silently, careful not to overstep, yet every subtle shift he made to protect her drew her gaze. When he spoke to others in her presence, his eyes always flicked to her, even briefly, holding a warning or a silent calculation. Every corner of the palace seemed alive with tension, each shadow reminding them both of the unseen bond growing between them. And the mark, it stirred faintly. Every heartbeat, every glance, every near touch caused a subtle, almost imperceptible pulse beneath her gown. It was teasing, it was whispering, it was alive. One night, Vaelor found Aralyn alone in the eastern tower. The moonlight painted her hair like molten fire. Her eyes were fierce, untamed, and yet soft with frustration and curiosity. You are reckless, he said, voice low, controlling. And you are relentless, she shot back. Always watching, always controlling, always thinking you know better. Vaelor's jaw tightened. He hated the tremor in his voice as he replied, I do this because you are mine to protect, whether you understand it or not. Her hands clenched at her sides. Her chest burned. She hated him. She hated that she felt relief. She hated the pull in her heart she could not resist. A strange heat pulsed beneath her back, subtle at first, then growing, coiling, curling through her veins like wildfire. Aralyn gasped, stumbling back. Vaelor's eyes widened. His hand shot instinctively toward her, but he did not touch. The mark glowed faintly beneath her gown, not bright yet, but alive. It shimmered like liquid fire, whispering a silent secret to them both. The mark, Vaelor whispered, barely audible. His voice shook something rare, something human. It's awake. Aralyn's eyes widened in fear and wonder. What does it mean? She asked, voice trembling. Vaelor's gaze softened, though still laced with authority. It means what has always been waiting. It responds to us, together. And in that moment, something shifted. Not love, not fully, not yet. But the threads of fate, hate, desire, and destiny intertwined like flames in a storm. The palace itself seemed to hum, as if acknowledging that the power she had carried, unknowingly all her life, had finally begun to stir. That night, both of them lay awake in their separate chambers, the moonlight spilling across the walls. Aralyn felt it beneath her skin, the pulse of power, the pull of something far greater than herself. Vaelor stared at the ceiling, hands clenched, chest tight. He hated that he cared, hated that he wanted more than control, hated that he could no longer pretend indifference. And yet, the mark had awakened. Not fully, not yet, but the first spark of destiny had ignited. And in the silence of the palace, neither could ignore the truth any longer. They were bound together. Aralyn sat quietly in the palace hall, her hands trembling slightly. The mark on her back, the source of all mystery, pulsed now with warmth she could finally understand. Not a power to dominate or control, but a legacy, a story she had been a part of without knowing. Vaelor stepped into the hall, calm, commanding. Yet something in his eyes had changed. The coldness had melted into something softer. He no longer sought the mark, no longer obsessed with unlocking its power. He wanted her, not her legacy, her. He began, voice low, struggling to contain a vulnerability he had denied. I don't want the mark anymore. I want you, all of you. Aralyn froze, disbelief flickering across her face. You want me? She whispered, heart hammering. Yes, he said simply, stepping closer. Not for what you carry, not for what you could give me, but for what you are, untamed, fierce. Her chest tightened. She had spent months believing he respected only strength, only control. Now, the truth shone in his eyes. Vaelor entered the courtyard where her friends had gathered, finally letting them meet him properly. Aralyn's companions, who had worried, whispered, and plotted quietly, now looked on with awe and relief. They belong together, one murmured. Finally, another breathed. The Alpha and Aralyn. Vaelor took her hand, and she did not pull away. I have tried to fight it, he said quietly. I tried to pretend I needed power. I tried to pretend I did not care. But I've always cared. I always will. Aralyn smiled through tears, and I cannot hate what I feel anymore. I love you too. The friends cheered quietly, joyful tears spilling. The palace echoed with laughter and celebration, not for power, not for legacy, but for the truth they had finally embraced. The mark glowed one last time, golden pulse across her back. It was not magic for domination. It was not a tool. It was a bond. And with that bond, Vaelor's hands found hers, holding not control but love. They stood together, facing the palace that had once been their battlefield, now a home for trust, for loyalty, for love. She finally understood. He finally admitted. The hatred, the betrayal, the fear, all transformed into something unbreakable. Her friends laughed and hugged her. Vaelor's closest allies, once wary of her, now nodded in respect. The palace had seen chaos, tension, and desire, but it had finally seen love fulfilled. And in the quiet of that night, as they held each other, Aralyn felt the mark's warmth fully, not as a curse, but as a promise of love that neither hate nor power could ever break. He whispered, voice trembling yet firm, we do not need power, Aralyn. We need each other. And that is stronger than anything this world can give. She smiled, heart full. And that is more than enough. The palace finally exhaled. The threads of betrayal, hate, desire, and magic now woven into a tapestry of love untamed, fierce, and eternal.
And that, my dear viewers, is where power, hate, and destiny meet, only to be transformed by love. Aralyn and Vaelor's journey teaches us one thing. True strength doesn't come from control, magic, or fear. It comes from trust, honesty, and the courage to open your heart, even when it's terrifying. Remember, it's easy to chase what you think you need, but real fulfillment comes when you see the truth in others and in yourself. Thank you for watching until the end. This is Elite Divide, where stories aren't just told. They live, they burn. and they stay with you.